Number 10. Joker kills Randall. Okay, in the 2019 Joker movie, written and directed by Todd Phillips, we have Arthur Fleck in his apartment before his big TV gig on the Franklin Murray Show later that night. He's then joined by his former colleagues Randall and Gary. They came in, just to check on the guy. They used to work with him, old friends. Let's do it. They question his face paint right off the bat by asking if he got a new gig or if he was planning on going to the rally. Arthur's like, no, my mom died, so I'm just celebrating. Okay, that's one way of celebrating a death. Randall then asks a few questions pertaining recent crimes. So Arthur, getting a little bit, curious, keeps the conversation going a bit, stalling as he pulls out a knife from behind him. And then, out of nowhere, stabs and kills Randall. Also, Gary was there, so it made us believe that nothing bad was gonna happen. Because, Arthur liked Gary. Who doesn't like Gary? And also, Gary at this point is out of the loop. So his shock of what just happened with the whole situation is kind of doing the talking for us. He's terrified of what he just saw, asking Arthur, why did he just do that? And his answer was, do you watch the Franklin Murray Show? Yeah, I'm gonna be on it tonight. The scene is chilling because he assures Gary so well that he can go free, even at one point pretending to lunge at him as he walks by, just to be funny. This scene is one of those scenes where you can't help but chuckle in fear, like your jaw's dropped and you're like, what is happening right now? You were the only one that was ever nice to me, Arthur says, before giving Gary a kiss on the forehead and sending him on his way. How lovely, I think. Number 9, the Lazarus Pit. So to save the world, you must save the life of your greatest enemy. Those are the words from Alfred as he and Batman prepare to toss Joker into the Lazarus Pit in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight issue 145. Using the purest water on Earth, Batman plans on tossing Joker into the Lazarus Pit to question him on the whereabouts of Talia and Ra's al Ghul. Knowing that the waters are capable for turning people sane for a brief amount of time, they plan to get Joker to spill the beans on the location in that moment. What a good plan, let's do it. So, while he's in the water, Alfred pulls out a gun to protect himself, but it's deemed unnecessary as Joker awakens. With his sanity? Yeah, it worked. And after a few confusing minutes of being awake, Joker tells the pair where they may be hiding. What do they do with the Joker? Well, they bring him along, of course.
The three best friends that anybody could have. We're the three best friends that anyone could have. We're the three best friends that anyone can have. And we'll never, ever, 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 ever leave each other.
Yeah, now that song is going to be stuck in your head as well. You're welcome. This moment was shocking because we find Joker reflecting on those who he's killed in the past. The dead. Sanity, such a burden, as Joker says. You can say that again. It's quite the burden. Number 8, dinner is served. In Death of the Family, issued October 2012, we find the Joker wearing a mask of his own face? Yeah, that's right, he used his face as a mask to cover his face. So he used a face mask to cover his face, which was the mask, so, The mask wasn't even good either. It was loose and flappy, and it was made of his rotten flesh. Kind of like old bologna. That was a gross image, sorry about that, last one. So what did he even do in the first place? Well, that's the point. While Batman was restrained to a chair, Joker had threatened to ignite the place up using gasoline. What a sticky situation. Literally, because his face. Okay, that was the last one, I swear. And just then, Alfred enters. Oh, thank God, a familiar face. But he's under the control of flesh-faced Joker. Never mind. The Joker then reveals that in front of all of Batman's allies, who are also at the nightmare dinner table, is their faces. What would you do if you woke up to this? Faint? Me too. Number 7, White Knight. This is a fun one. Imagine if Joker was the good guy and Batman was the bad. Okay, well in Batman White Knight number 1, released in December 2017, we get to see this. Written by Sean Murphy, this story finds Joker as the hero. And this Batman is reckless. He's destroying the city just to get close to him. Once Batman gets his hands on Joker, the Joker tricks Batman into drugging him so that he can be sane again, becoming Jack Napier. So the Joker at this point actually outsmarts Batman. Ooh! He uses legal knowledge to convince Jim Gordon to arrest him for all this crazy stuff that he's doing just to get to him. This same Joker was still after Batman, so he used the Mad Hatter's control device to do a lot of his dirty work. Nightwing and Batgirl even joined in on the cause to bring in the Caped Crusader. This is a great version of Joker to see. Reviews for this story have been mainly positive. What did you guys think? Let us know below. Number 6, Martha Wayne. Come again? Alternate universes are fun, Flashpoint specifically. So in this universe, Flash's mom is still alive, right? But other weird paths have happened in this universe to get to that point. So things are a little different in big ways. So in this universe, Bruce Wayne is the one who got shot, not his parents. Oh nice. So Thomas Wayne ends up becoming the Caped Crusader using guns and a splash of more violence, while Martha Wayne takes on the mantle of the Joker. That's right, she immediately goes nuts after the death of her son and starts slashing up her own face, taking on the look of the Joker almost immediately. She knows Thomas Wayne, now Batman, would never kill her, so she uses that against him in the storyline. We actually caught a glimpse of this in the opening credits of Batman vs Superman released in 2016. Didn't anybody else find it odd that Lauren Cohen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan played Bruce Wayne's parents for such a small amount of screen time? They were pretty big actors and were even bigger at the time. Well, it was revealed that a Flashpoint movie has since then been in the works, so hopefully we get to see Zack Snyder's dream of casting Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Batman, and even better, hopefully we see Lauren Cohen taking on the role of Joker. She would probably get an easy Oscar nomination for it. I'll call it now. Check that date. I'm calling it. Number 5. Captain Atom. Taking place in the Kingdom Come miniseries, the world is in a future with our favorite superheroes much older. Basically out of touch with the times. So the new generation of superheroes are running free doing all the dirty work. Most of these offspring are children of past superheroes. Some of the new heroes, however, end up kind of being dicks. Yeah, they're becoming a threat, being irresponsible, and they're pretty dangerous. So Batman, being Batman, wanted to ensure a safe future and prevent a war between all of the supers. Not a bad idea, but a little too late. Captain Atom then lost a fight to Parasite. The end result, Captain Atom being ripped apart, causing a nuclear explosion that decimated the entire state of Kansas. Sorry, Kansas. Oops, my bad. Number 4, Martian Manhunter. Your kind will fail. Your kind will always fail. Those are some of the last words spoken by Martian Manhunter in Final Crisis 1 after he gets trapped in a prison. He had originally went there to be undercover as John Jones and regularly reported back to Batman. Then the villains broke free and he was left behind. Ooh, not good. Human Flame had given the villain Libra instructions to kill Martian Manhunter. Don't do it! So Libra went and stabbed Martian Manhunter with a staff in front of the entire secret society of supervillains, or SS or SOV. Okay, some acronyms don't work, okay? So upon his death, he returned back to his Martian form, and in his final moments, he still managed to send a message back to the Justice League. What a trooper! They held his funeral on his home planet Mars, with Superman giving the eulogy. Can you do mine as well, Superman? My eulogy, please? In time, not now, just like when it happens. Thanks. His final moments were expanded on in the Final Crisis Requiem storyline, teaching us more about his homeworld and the inhabitants of it. Number 3, Wally West. Heroes in Crisis 9. So after visiting the sanctuary, trying to avoid another flashback scenario, past Wally West leans in to break future Wally West's neck. In order to close the timeline, one of the Wallys has to die, right? So then Blue Beetle, Batgirl, Harley, and Booster, they all land and they're super confused seeing what's unfolding. Then they see Poison Ivy, who was presumed dead at the time. So future Wally knows how he feels, so he helps him up and reassures him that he's not alone. And as he himself was there just 5 days prior. Don't kill, don't run, just talk and listen. Pretty solid advice. He goes on to explain that if people could see that even the strongest of heroes are hurting inside, that they need to talk to people. Which is a pretty solid line. I feel like a lot of people reading this could use that advice in their own lives in some way. Booster suggests not killing Wally, but instead completing the loop. So by bringing back a speed clone from the 25th century, that way the old Flash can live on, and the young Flash does the loop over. Kinda like how Cap took the stones back in time to complete that loop. See, while Cap's still alive, he's kinda not because he's stuck in that loop, right? So he's gone, but he's not. But he's gone, but he's not. He's gone. The Heroes in Crisis storyline to take out Wally West went under fire. Like, I mean, what do you guys think? Were you a fan of how the deconstruction of Wally West came about? Let us know down below. Let's talk about it. Number 2, Connor Kent's death. Taking place in the Infinite Crisis storyline, Superboy is killed by Superboy Prime. What? So the other dimension Superboy Prime basically gets jealous and wants to take Superboy's spot in the Paradise dimension. He thinks he's more fitting. Yeah, okay pal, whatever you say. So Superboy Prime attacks him and kicks his ass. Backup arrives, that being the Teen Titans, Doom Patrol, and the Justice Society of America, but the next encounter ends much worse than the previous. Connor and Prime go at it, and eventually Superboy crashes them both into Alexander Luthor's multiverse tower, causing this massive explosion, stopping Alexander from destroying New Earth. Dying in the arms of Wonder Girl, Connor is told by Cassie that he saved the Earth. And in a glorious last line, he says, "I know, Cass, isn't it cool? and then he dies just moments before the rest of the gang showed up. Superman mourning his death is actually just heartbreaking. And finally, number 1, Hal Jordan Parallax. Parallax entity is the sentient embodiment of fear, the symbol of fear, rather. So, once Hal Jordan becomes the Green Lantern after Abin Sur in Sector 2814, Sinestro made Parallax choose Hal Jordan to free itself from the central battery. Parallax spent many years influencing Hal over time, causing doubt and fear to flood his mind. Once the destruction of Coast City happened, that plus the central battery that Hal destroyed, the entity Parallax was able to latch itself onto Hal Jordan's soul. Not good. Hal's strong willpower made this plan take years to be complete, but once Cyborg Superman helped destroy Coast City, he could only hold on to that willpower for so long. Pushing through all of the anger and grief, Hal Jordan ended up sacrificing his own life to reignite the Earth's sun. Atta boy, Hal. This is actually a really sad moment, like, holy.
Number 10, Green Arrow. Now I'm sure we all know who Green Arrow is, so I won't dive too deep into his backstory, but I will give you a little taste just in case you're not super familiar. Now Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, is a vigilante superhero who fights crime in his home of Star City, using archery, martial arts, and technology. Not to mention by day he is also a wealthy playboy and billionaire industrialist turned outspoken socially progressive politician. Honestly, just think Batman, but way less sad and with arrows. Needless to say, he is a good superhero, and unfortunately he met an untimely end back in 1995. Here's how that story played out. The Russians planned on planting a bomb that releases a bacteria that would destroy millions of buildings in Metropolis, killing all the people inside of them. The bomb works when two people put their hands on the detonator. While the bomb is in transit on a plane, for some reason Green Arrow put his arm on the detonator, knowing that if he removes his arm, the bomb would explode. Superman showed up and suggested that they would just cut off the appendage with his heat vision, but Oliver for some reason refused. In the end, the bomb went off and Green Arrow became, well, no more. Check it out for yourself in 1995's Green Arrow number 99 all the way to 101. Number 9, Rorschach's death. In the last issue of the original Watchmen limited series entitled A Strong and Loving World, we get a truly shocking reveal. Ozymandias was actually the bad guy all along. Turns out he was responsible for the death of thousands in New York, the death of the comedian, the accusations on Dr. Manhattan, and the framing of Moloch. Sure, that's shocking to say the least, but there's actually a lot more, as is what happens after that's truly shocking. Now, don't get me wrong, Ozymandias' intentions were good. He did all that he could to prevent a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US. But it was still an injustice for Rorschach, and he wanted to expose Ozymandias. Setting out to do so, Rorschach encounters Dr. Manhattan and tells him what's actually happening. Dr. Manhattan tried to stop Rorschach from exposing Ozymandias, but Rorschach responded by saying that Manhattan had to kill him to stop him. In a shocking turn of events, Dr. Manhattan actually did so and vaporized Rorschach and chose to believe in Ozymandias' cause instead of anything else. Now, if you haven't already read this limited series, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out, starting with 1986's Watchmen, number 1. Number 8, Sue Dibney's death. Now this sad death takes place during the Identity Crisis storyline, and it's actually what sets it all in motion. Now if you're not familiar with Identity Crisis, it's basically a love story wrapped inside a murder mystery, with a concerted effort to bring a real-world crime and quote-unquote darkness to all of the Justice League. Now it all starts with, like I said, the death of Sue Dibney, the elongated man's wife, and from there it just spirals into a story of lines being crossed by both supervillains and heroes. Addressing heavy topics like forced mind wiping, the story made some readers pretty uncomfortable to say the least, and when all was said and done, the family members of a few heroes were dead and the reputations of others were completely tarnished in brand new ways. It's eventually realized by Dr. Midnight, Mr. Terrific, and Batman, all separately I might say, that Sue was murdered using some pretty familiar technology. However, it wasn't done by someone that we would expect. Now if you don't want to hear this, I will say cover your ears, but honestly you probably already know this by now, the murderer was Jean Loring, the wife of the Atom who was committed to Arkham Asylum after she was discovered. Now there are definitely two viewings of Identity Crisis. One is a dark tragedy reflective of the real world that we all live in now, and one is a tenaciously destructive tentacle of the Watchmen squid monster, still sort of wriggling around 15 years later. But I've only seen the former, but if you do see the latter, let me know in the comments below. Now if you haven't read it and want to give it a go, check out 2004's Identity Crisis number 1 all the way to 2005's Identity Crisis number 7. Number 7, Barry Allen's death. First of all, I just want to get it out there that the Crisis on Infinite Earths event is absolutely insane, and if you're not familiar with it, you should 1000% give it all a read. Put simply, it was an attempt to reboot the entire DC universe because everything had become a bit too confusing, and obviously DC's way of doing that was to just get rid of the multiverse and many of its characters, one of which being Barry Allen. Near the end of the event, Barry made the ultimate sacrifice by literally running himself to death in order to save countless lives. What he did is, in order to put a stop to the Anti-Monitor's plan to destroy the world with his antimatter cannon, Barry ran so fast that he created a speed vortex that would absorb the power of the cannon, but he ended up dying in the process. For years, the character remained dead, leaving the mantle to Wally West, the original Kid Flash, to serve as the Scarlet Speedster in his stead. Eventually, this story was retconned and it was revealed that Barry didn't actually die. But back in the day, this supposed death really hit home, and that's why it deserves a spot on this list today. Check it out for yourself in 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 8. Number 6, Supergirl's death. Now remember how I just said Crisis on Infinite Earths was an absolutely insane storyline and killed a ton of heroes? Well, sadly among those ranks was also Supergirl, losing her life one issue before Barry loses his. Now like I said before, the storyline was all about simplifying the DC universe and having it go back to its roots. And since there was originally only one Kryptonian on Earth, that meant Kara had to go. I'm glad to say though that the character was at least able to go out like a hero as she battled it out with the Anti-Monitor, who kept hitting her with lethal doses of his energy. She kept on fighting though until a lethal blow sadly took her out. Like the true hero she is, she sacrificed her life for her cousin Superman and died in his arms. Later we see Superman leave his Fortress of Solitude with the body of Supergirl wrapped in her indestructible cape, and he sets her free in space, promising to remember and miss her forever. Although this death was not as impactful as Barry's, I would argue that Supergirl's was much more shocking, as it was much more immediate than Barry's. Readers actually got to spend a few moments with Barry despite actually knowing that he was gonna die, while Kara's kinda just came straight out of left field. Check it out for yourself in 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 7. Number 5, Jason Todd's death. The death of Jason Todd was so surprising that it not only shocked readers, it shocked DC themselves. Now the character has had a pretty weird history, as he was introduced as the new teenage Robin after Dick Grayson grew up and became Nightwing. But fan reaction to Jason was pretty mixed. In 1988, DC Comics writer Denny O'Neil pitched the idea of making the readers vote via a 1-900 number on how a story would end, and O'Neil knew the vote couldn't be on something small, so he decided the vote would be about the fate of the second Robin, Jason Todd. Knowing that Todd was relatively unpopular, it would help settle what needed to be done with the character. So, setting up a 36-hour voting period, readers got one of two numbers to call from the back of Batman number 427. The ending of that issue showed us the Joker beating Todd with a crowbar, leaving him in a warehouse that was set to explode. Then issue 428 came out and the final vote was 5,343 for killing Todd and 5,721 against it, meaning his fate was sealed. Jason Todd was dead, and the iconic image of Batman carrying Todd's body that followed was one that is still recognizable to most comic fans today. Years after the event, O'Neil revealed there was actually someone who programmed their phone to call every 90 seconds for 8 hours. That person chose the same option every time for Jason Todd to die. Totaling around 320 votes from that one person alone, O'Neil has gone on record saying that one person was the reason why Jason died in the first place. If you're not familiar with this storyline, aka Death in the Family, check it out for yourself, starting with 1988's Batman Volume 1 number 426 to number 429. Number 4, Alexandra DeWitt's death. For so many heroes, one of their biggest fears is that their secret identity will get out and put their loved ones at risk, so generally they do all they can in order to prevent that from happening. In Kyle Rayner's case, he learned the hard way what happens if you're not careful enough. After taking over the Green Lantern mantle from Hal Jordan and receiving his power ring, Rayner seeks out his girlfriend Alexandra, or Alex DeWitt. DeWitt wasn't sure what to make of the new power Rayner had acquired, but eventually helped Rayner control and understand the potential he had command over. In hindsight, probably not the best idea, because one day he came home and found out that she had been killed by the supervillain Major Force and had been stuffed into a refrigerator. Kyle, obviously upset and motivated by anger and regret, sought out Major Force. Kyle almost killed Major Force before his ring runs out of power, and then Major Force takes over the fight until his quote-unquote green rock that powers the power rings turns into a lantern battery and charges Rayner's ring. Rayner finally subdues Major Force, but when he begins to interrogate Major Force over why he was there and why he killed DeWitt, the police arrive and try to take Rayner away. Rayner obviously flees and runs into Alan Scott, who tries to console him over his loss. DC writer Gail Simone, now a legend in her own right, was horrified that the company had consented to kill a female character in such a gruesome way, merely to motivate the male protagonist. She coined the term "women in refrigerators" for any time women in comics were killed, seriously injured, violated, or depowered merely to motivate male heroes, and she published a long list of such cases. Check out her death for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 55. Number 3, Death of Superman. In 1992, in response to not being able to do their original story, which was to have Lois Lane and Clark get married, due to conflicts with the then upcoming Lois and Clark The New Adventures of Superman, the writers of the Superman titles just decided to straight up kill him instead. The way they pulled this off was to introduce a new character, an almost unthinkable monster whose only purpose was to destroy things. Dubbed Doomsday, he cut a swath of destruction towards Metropolis. Jump forward a little bit to 1993 and we see Superman take on this unstoppable bad guy. Now obviously Superman was able to take down the bad guy because he's, you know, Superman, but both Doomsday and Superman ended up succumbing to their injuries at the end of the fight. While some heroes have been resurrected multiple times, this was the first and only time that Clark Kent bit the dust, and it sent shockwaves through the entire world of comics. The aftermath of the story followed how the world reacted and who showed up to take its place, the latter part featuring the introduction of several new characters who stuck around to help form the later DCU. Death of Superman is one of the most far-reaching media events in comics history, and that coupled with the return of Superman changed the rules for DC forever, opening the door for anyone to come back to life. Check out the storyline for yourself so you can see firsthand what this death meant to the DC universe, starting with 1992 Superman The Man of Steel Volume 1, number 18. Number 2, Crisis on Infinite Earths. By the mid-1980s, many of DC's superheroes had been around for about 50 years, and things were starting to get a little bit confusing. Early versions of characters didn't match up with later versions, and the comics had way too many continuity problems regarding ages, time periods, powers. There were just little flaws in continuity everywhere, especially with their bigger characters. Now while most fans were willing to overlook these flaws, it was becoming more and more problematic with each passing year. Crisis on Infinite Earths changed the whole landscape of the DC universe and served as the first time a comic book company would reboot its entire continuity in order to revamp everything. Crisis on Infinite Earths essentially wiped out all of these continuity issues, the multiverse, and even several characters, because, you know, back when character deaths actually meant something, giving us a streamlined, consistent DC universe for the first time in a very long time. The storyline itself brought together heroes from all over DC's universes to battle the Anti-Monitor, and ended with some major deaths. As well as resetting the DC universe and revitalizing characters and storylines, Crisis was one of the first major overarching comic book crossover events. It really goes without saying, but if you haven't read this storyline yet, then you're truly missing out, so check out 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths number 1, all the way to 1986's Crisis on Infinite Earths number 12. And number 1, massive layoffs. This is actually something that Amanda brought to my attention, and when I read more about it, I knew this had to be at the top of our list today. Taking place in early to mid-August, so this month, there were rumors going around that DC had not only laid off a ton of employees, they'd also completely shut down DC Collectibles. Described as an absolute bloodbath by reporters everywhere, those said to have lost their positions are Editor-in-Chief Bob Harris, Senior VP of Publishing Strategies and Support Services Hank Cannells, VP of Marketing and Creative Services Jonah Wieland, VP Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy Bobby Chase, Senior Story Editor Brian Cunningham, and Executive Director Mark Doyle, who oversaw the rollout of the Black Label graphic novels. That's not even including the other 600 employees that lost their jobs as well, so needless to say, this is a hefty bunch of people who lost their jobs. For now though, it does remain to be seen just how much these layoffs will affect DC and how the publishers will bounce back.
Number 10, Stephanie Brown. So after months of training from Batman, Stephanie Brown served as Robin during patrols. Nice, not a bad gig at all. Things were going well with the duo, you know, fighting crime, taking ass, kicking names, until she was captured by Mr. Zsasz and she resorted to using lethal force against him. That's a big no in Batman's eyes, so he fired her. Not even a write-up? Come on, dude. Even though she was saving his life? I mean, no? Alright. So her next step was to steal some plans and attempt to regain Batman's trust by going after Gotham's criminal underworld. Sneaky sneaky. This didn't go as planned and a city-wide war erupted. Oof! Yikes. It wasn't long before Stephanie was captured by Black Mask. She was then tortured in order to spill the beans on Batman. So after a harrowing escape, she makes her way to Leslie Tompkins' clinic, in rough shape of course, and her injuries were too much to recover from, and Stephanie Brown died with the Caped Crusader by her side. How lovely and also how tragic. Number 9, Black Mask. Yeah, I figured this would be a suitable place for this one. Making his first appearance in 1985 back in Batman issue 386, Black Mask, also known as Roman Sionis, met his demise in Catwoman Volume 3, issue 52. See, this is why you don't threaten the people that are close to Catwoman, because after breaking out of jail yet again, Deathstroke offers Black Mask a spot in the society, to which he accepts. I'd probably accept too, that sounds like a pretty cool society. Any society's cool in that book. All the while, Red Hood is dismantling Black Mask's control over the crime going on in the city. Black Mask, being Black Mask, decides to keep running his mouth and threatens the people closest to Catwoman. So what does she do? Shoots him in the jaw, killing him in the process. Wrong move, bucko. I really enjoyed how they killed him off in Birds of Prey. I was kind of hoping it'd be similar to this, but being blown up, I'm fine with that. That works like a charm as well. Number 8, Guy Gardner. Taking place in a prequel to the Injustice Gods Among Us storyline, we find Superman as the leader of Earth. Makes sense? Look at him. I mean, all those powers. Of course. Using his powers to brutally enforce peace, Green Lantern, aka Guy Gardner, wasn't really a fan of his whole concept. Good Guy Gardner. He was also onto something after all, because Guy eventually discovered that Superman had been an ally to the Sinestro Corps. Traitor. So he goes and gathers his own army, the Green Lantern Corps. Hal Jordan actually took Superman's side here, but that's only because he originally thought that Guy had killed John Stewart, which in fact Sinestro actually did. Got a little, quite the triangle we got here, boys. Hal ended up tearing off Guy Gardner's arm, Bucky Barnes style, before leaving him for death. Not a good way to go. Number 7, Blue Beetle. During the events of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Ted was tracking a signal from a bug. He followed it to Checkmate headquarters in Switzerland. Upon arriving, he finds files containing all the information of all Earth's superheroes. I'm talking their strengths, weaknesses, identities even. A lot of bad stuff. And then in comes Black King and, drumroll please, Maxwell Lord. The longtime ally had been planning to use Brother Eye and the Omax to kill all of Earth's metahumans. So once the files were deleted, Ted makes a run for it. Stopped by an OMAC and locked up, Maxwell comes in to deliver the final bullet to his head, right after he tells Maxwell to rot in hell, that is. Number 6, Darkseid. Yeah, you heard me. In the final Crisis event, Batman himself killed Darkseid. Now, of course, Batman had to break his only rule to do this, but I mean, come on guys, it's Darkseid we're talking about. We can make an exception. By the time issue 6 rolls around, the world is on the brink of destruction. So Batman decides he's going to use the exact same bullet Darkseid used to kill Orion. So Batman aims and fires it right at his shoulder. Darkseid panics and tries to switch bodies into Detective Dan Turpin. But Wonder Woman comes in, uses a lasso of truth, and releases Darkseid's consciousness from Turpin's body. And at the same time, Batman died. What an event, that's right. So at the same time that Batman shot Darkseid with that bullet, Darkseid used the Omega Beams and just straight up obliterates Batman. Batman ended up teleporting to prehistoric times, but we can't not include that in this list, part of this moment. Number 5, Lois Lane lives. Speaking of Batman vs Superman, whenever the two cross paths, it's usually a pretty epic time. So after Lois was poisoned by the Joker in Action 17, released in 1996, 2 years after I was born, so old, Superman is faced with the toughest choice. Joker had made it so in order to cure Lois from the poison, Superman must kill the clown prince of comedy himself. Batman reminds Superman of the tremendous guilt that he felt after he killed the Phantom Zone villain in the Pocket Universe. So we got ourselves a situation. So Superman makes the hard choice but to let Lois Lane die. The Joker laughing all the while. So after her supposed death, she lets out a large gasp of air. The Joker starts laughing. So Superman and Lois now both have to deal with the fact that Superman would rather let the love of his life be killed rather than kill the Joker. See, the Joker's always strapped. He's always got a plan. It's tough times, man. Sometimes you just gotta take the L. Number 4, The Killing Joke. Batman the Killing Joke, released in 2016, also made into a feature-length animated film, is one of my favorite storylines. Let me explain why. So, after the Joker had escaped Arkham Asylum, his first stop was to hit up Commissioner Gordon's house, obviously. Barbara unfortunately had to answer the door. God. So Joker fires a bullet that ended up paralyzing her below the waist. And after taking some pretty messed up photos of Barbara, Joker kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and forces him to go on a ride in this messed up amusement park that he's brought him to. And the ride isn't that much fun because as the ride goes on, Gordon is forced to see these horrible photos of his daughter taken from that night. What an absolute nightmare. I've been on roller coasters, but none have been that scary, I don't think. Number 3, Joker kills the audience. Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. So this moment mirrors what happened in the finale of the Joker movie, kinda. So Joker is invited on a talk show to get some insight behind his madness. Always a great idea. Let's get more of those guests on there. After being asked by the host why he's killed people, Joker explains how he's going to kill everybody in this room. And cue the panic laughs. Joker begins to explain that he thinks he's Batman's psychotic obsession. But then after asking about the lovely mugs that guests would get on these talk shows, the Joker goes, oh nice, breaks the mug and then stabs Dr. Bartholomew in the neck, who was aiding Joker for this interview. So it turns out the Joker was not that cured at all. And if that wasn't bad enough, he then murdered the entire audience with poisonous gas. Just a nice finishing touch. A+. Number 2, killing Rachel. My favorite portrayal of the Joker is still Heath Ledger's. Now, I love the other versions, but after seeing this movie when I was younger and seeing Heath's performance for the first time, it was just surreal. One of the most shocking moments from that movie was when he made Batman choose between saving Harvey Dent or Rachel. And I, of course, had to include this in our list. This is a great moment. The build up to the scene and the character choices that Heath made to express the insanity of the Joker, so good. The scene, of course, doesn't end on a happy note. As we all remember, Rachel gets blown away to smithereens and Harvey starts to mentally decline after her loss, thus becoming the notorious Two-Face. And finally, number 1, the Joker breaks his own spine. Excuse me? Ever lean back in your chair at work and you kind of give it a bit too much? Ooh, gives you quite a oh my god feeling. It's not pleasant. Well, in the 1986 The Dark Knight Returns, we find Joker and Batman hashing it out. So while Batman is kicking his ass, he explains to him how many people he's let die simply by just not killing the Joker. "I never kept count of them," says the Joker, and Batman responds simply with, "I did." So Joker begins to stab Batman, and Batman twists Joker's neck. He's still alive enough to taunt Batman, still somehow. "Come on, finish me," he begs. Batman doesn't budge. So Joker decides, you know what, he's done enough. So the Joker decides to twist his own neck so hard, making it so that he himself has the final blow, thus now making Batman a killer.
Number 10, Superman and Wonder Woman's carnal embrace. Hopefully we all know who Frank Miller is, one of the most influential and popular creators in comics today, having wrote and illustrated Batman The Dark Knight Returns and The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Ring a bell? Okay, good. Well, Frank Miller was also responsible for one of DC's most disturbing moments when he portrayed Superman and Wonder Woman, how should I say this, getting it on? All things considered, we've probably seen worse, right? After all, DC had Superman and Wonder Woman dating as part of their New 52 continuity, so it should come as no surprise that the two would, you know. However, Frank Miller's over-the-top writing showed that this act was actually killing an untold number of people. How, you might ask? Well, in one specific case, as these two godlike beings fly up in the air and crash down to Earth during the act, we see earthquakes erupting all over the planet, hurricanes forming, tsunamis going nuts, and Hawaii was actually completely evacuated. All for the payoff of a super dumb pun, with Wonder Woman noting that the Earth moved. But sure, it's a cute joke, but how many people died due to the carelessness of these two? Now, I couldn't find the exact issue that this takes place in, but I know what happens in The Dark Knight Returns, so if you know it or can find the issue, post it in the comments below so we can all check it out for ourselves. Number 9, No More Watchmen. In the last issue of the original Watchmen limited series entitled A Strong and Loving World, we get a truly shocking reveal. Ozymandias was actually the bad guy all along. Turns out he was responsible for the deaths of thousands in New York, the death of the comedian, the accusations on Dr. Manhattan, and the framing of Moloch. Sure, that is shocking to say the least, but there's actually more, as it's what happens after that that's truly shocking. Now, don't get me wrong, Ozymandias' intentions were good. He did all that he could to prevent a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US. But it was still an injustice for Rorschach, and he wanted to expose Ozymandias. Setting out to do so, Rorschach encounters Dr. Manhattan and tells him exactly what happened. Dr. Manhattan tries to stop Rorschach from exposing Ozymandias, but Rorschach responded by saying that Manhattan had to kill him first in order to stop him. Now, in a shocking turn of events, Dr. Manhattan actually vaporized Rorschach and chose to believe in Ozymandias' cause instead. If you haven't already read this limited series, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out, starting with 1986's Watchmen, number 1. Number 8, Emerald Twilight. In the mid-90s, DC decided that it was finally time for the second and most well-known Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, to step down from the mantle so that it could be passed on to someone else. So how did DC decide to end the career of one of their most beloved heroes? Well, they couldn't just send him off quietly. Of course, they had to turn him into a villain of some sorts, undoing pretty much all of the good he's ever done. In the reign of Superman's storyline, which took place after the death of Superman's storyline, Hal's home of Coast City was completely destroyed by the villains Mongol and Cyborg Superman. As a result, the city was demolished and its 7 million citizens were killed. This turn of events made Hal completely lose it, and he believed that if he could steal all the main power batteries' energy, the source of the Green Lantern's rings, he could permanently rebuild Coast City. To do so, he killed all of the remaining Green Lantern Corps and the villain Sinestro, which led to him becoming the villain Parallax. To DC's credit though, they later redeemed Hal by having him sacrifice his life to restart the sun during the Final Night storyline, and revealing that his madness had been caused by being possessed by an entity made of fear. Hal would later go on to reform the Green Lantern Corps thanks to the expert guidance of Jeff Johns, but Emerald Twilight does still remain a black spot on DC's legacy. Check out this insane storyline for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48 all the way to number 50. Number 7, The Killing Joke. Now I feel like I've already mentioned this before, but I am gonna mention it again. This is probably my favorite Batman storyline ever. The story involved the Joker breaking loose from Arkham Asylum, kidnapping Commissioner Gordon, and attempting to drive the man mad, all to prove that it only takes one terrible day to drive anyone crazy, which is actually a theme that was revisited in the Dark Knight movie, in which the Joker believes anyone will do terrible things if the circumstances are bleak enough. Along the way, Joker attacked Barbara Gordon in a way that still has people talking decades later. Joker shot her through the spine and paralyzed her. Later, while trying to drive Commissioner Gordon crazy, Joker showed him pictures he took of Barbara that showed Joker took off her clothes and insinuated some pretty bad things. Although regarded today as a classic Batman/Joker story, The Killing Joke has also received some deserved criticism for the way that it had the Joker paralyze Barbara Gordon, making her another victim in the woman in the refrigerator trope, which I will talk about just a little bit later. Barbara did later become a hero to many paraplegics when she became the cyber crime fighter known as Oracle, but the circumstances of her paralysis are still considered some of the most exploitative moments in comic book history to today. If you think you can stomach it, check out this one shot for yourself in 1988's Batman: The Killing Joke. Number 6. Identity Crisis. Now at its core, Identity Crisis is a love story wrapped inside a murder mystery with a concerted effort to bring real-world crime and quote-unquote darkness to the Justice League's ivory watchtower. It all starts with the death of Sue Dibney, the elongated man's wife, and from there it spirals into a story of lines being crossed by which supervillains and heroes. Addressing heavy topics like forced mind wiping, the story made some readers pretty uncomfortable, and when all was said and done, the family members of a few heroes were dead and the reputations of others were tarnished in brand new ways. It's eventually realized by Dr. Midnight, Mr. Terrific, and Batman, all separately I might add, that Sue was murdered using some pretty familiar tech. However, it's not done by someone that you would expect. Cover your ears now if you don't want to hear who it was. Okay, the murderer was Jean Loring, the wife of the Atom who was committed to Arkham Asylum after she's discovered. There are two viewings of Identity Crisis. One is a dark tragedy reflective of the real world, and one is a tenaciously destructive tentacle of the Watchmen squid monster still wriggling around 15 years later. I've only seen the former, but if you've seen the latter, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Haven't read it and want to give it a go? Well, check out 2004's Identity Crisis number 1 all the way to 2005's Identity Crisis number 7. Number 5. Ted Kord's death. In the pages of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the second Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, is left near bankruptcy after funds from his company were mysteriously stolen. His investigation into his missing fortune leads him to something much darker though. A conspiracy to wipe out the superhuman community orchestrated by the Justice League International's former manager, Maxwell Lord. Lord had definitely enjoyed his influence over the Justice League and the formation of Justice League International in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, he was a wealthy and powerful businessman who claimed to have learned nobility and compassion from his late father, Maxwell Lord III. All of this pointed to him as a very genuine figure out to keep Earth safe, but I guess we were wrong because during the Invasion saga, Lord acquires the superpower of mind control, and things only got worse from there. The build up to Infinite Crisis saw many shocking events occur in the DC universe, including Lord's brutal murder of Ted Kord. Lord's betrayal didn't even end there, as he continued to damage the League throughout the Infinite Crisis. Thankfully, Wonder Woman straight up just murders him after he mind controls Superman into assaulting his fellow Leaguers, snapping his neck, which was also super shocking, so I guess this point is kind of a twofer. Check out this death in 2005's Countdown to Infinite Crisis number 1. Number 4. Superman's death. Wonder Woman Dead Earth. This Wonder Woman storyline follows Wonder Woman being accidentally awakened by a group of survivors from a centuries-long sleep at the Batcave. Diana discovers the Earth has been reduced to a nuclear wasteland and is infected by mutated insectoid creatures. Now what does this have to do with Superman, you ask? Well, in issue 3 of this miniseries, Diana and Cheetah head to the Fortress of Solitude to see if Superman is still alive and well and can help them protect the people of Earth. Upon entering the fortress, they are greeted by robot Superman, and Diana gets quite the shock to say the least when she sees Superman dead on his throne. And it only gets worse from there because it turns out she was the one who killed him. Flashback all those years ago to that huge war, and we see the US release a full armada of missiles against all of the Amazonians. Clark knew they were going to be targeting Smallville as well, so he went to go protect his family, which left Wonder Woman to defend Paradise Island alone. Now there were far too many missiles and her home wound up being destroyed. She completely lost it and started pummeling Superman, ending his life with a punch straight through his chest. Now the way that this was drawn is absolutely beautiful, so check it out for yourself in 2020's Wonder Woman Dead Earth number 3. Number 3. Alex DeWitt. For so many heroes, one of their biggest fears is that their secret identity will get out and put their loved ones at risk. So generally they do anything and everything that they can in order to prevent that from happening. In Kyle Rayner's case, he learned the hard way what happens if you're not careful enough. After taking over the Green Lantern mantle from Hal Jordan and receiving his power ring, Rayner seeks out his girlfriend Alexandra, or Alex DeWitt. DeWitt wasn't sure what to make of the new power Rayner had acquired, but eventually she decided to help Rayner control and understand the potential power he had command over. Probably not the best idea, idea because he came home one day and found out that she had been killed by the supervillain Major Force and had been stuffed into a refrigerator. Kyle, obviously upset and motivated by anger and regret, sought out Major Force. Kyle almost killed Major Force before his ring runs out of power. Major Force then takes over the fight until his green rocks that powers the power rings turns into a lantern battery and charges Rainer's ring back up. Rainer finally subdues Major Force, but when he begins to interrogate Major Force over why he was there and why he killed DeWitt, the police arrived and tried to take Rainer away. Now Rainer obviously flees and runs into Alan Scott, who tries to console him over his loss. DC writer Gail Simone, now a legend in her own right, was absolutely horrified that the company consented to kill a female character and in such a gruesome way, merely to motivate the male protagonist. That's when she coined the term women in refrigerators for any time women in comics were killed, seriously injured, sexually violated, or depowered merely to motivate male heroes. And she published a long list of such cases, so go check it out for yourself. Now check out her death for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 55. Number 2. Jason Todd's death. The death of Jason Todd was so surprising that it not only shocked readers, it shocked DC themselves. Now the character had a pretty weird history as he was introduced as a new teenage Robin after Dick Grayson grew up and became Nightwing, but fans weren't really too keen on him. In 1988, DC Comics writer Denny O'Neil pitched the idea to make the readers vote via 1/900 numbers on how a story should end, and O'Neil knew that the vote couldn't be on something tiny or small, so he decided that the vote would be about the fate of Jason Todd. Knowing that Todd was relatively unpopular, it seemed like the right thing to do to help settle what needed to be done with the character. Setting up a 36-hour voting period, readers got one of two numbers to call from the back of Batman number 427. The ending of that issue showed us the Joker beating Todd with a crowbar, leaving him in a warehouse that was set to explode. Then issue number 428 came out and the final vote was 5,343 for killing Jason Todd and 5,271 against killing him, meaning that his fate was kinda sealed. Jason Todd was dead, and the iconic image of Batman carrying Todd's dead body that followed was one that is still recognizable to pretty much everyone today. Now, years after the event, O'Neil revealed that there was someone who programmed their phone to call every 90 seconds for 8 hours. That person chose the same option every time, for Jason Todd to die. Totaling around 320 votes from that one person alone, O'Neil has gone on record saying that that one person is the entire reason that Jason Todd died. So I guess they're also the reason that we have the Red Hood, so thank you? I don't know. If you're not familiar with this storyline, aka a death in the family, check it out for yourself starting with 1988's Batman Volume 1, number 426, all the way to 429. Number 1. Death of Superman. Now of course, we have to talk about this one, we can't not. In 1992, the writers of the Superman titles had enough of the Man of Steel and decided to just straight up kill him. Okay, not really. In response to not being able to do their original story, which was to have Lois Lane and Clark Kent get married, due to all the conflicts with the then upcoming Lois and Clark The New Adventures of Superman, the writers were racking their brain trying to figure out what to do, and they ultimately landed on this storyline. The way they pulled this off was they introduced a new character, an almost unthinkable monster whose only purpose was to destroy things. Known as Doomsday, this monster caused some serious destruction towards Metropolis. Jump forward a little bit to 1993 and we see Superman take on this unstoppable bad guy. Obviously Superman was able to take him down because, you know, he's Superman, but both Doomsday and Superman ended up succumbing to their injuries at the end of the fight. Now while some superheroes have been resurrected multiple times, this was the very first time that Clark Kent had bit the dust, and it sent shockwaves through the entire world of DC Comics. The aftermath of the story followed how the world reacted and who showed up to take its place, the latter part featuring the introduction of several new characters who stuck around to help later form the DCU. Death of Superman is one of the most far-reaching media events in comics history, and to this day it still stands as such, and that coupled with the return of Superman changed the rules for DC, opening the door for anyone to come back to life. So check out the storyline for yourself so you can see firsthand exactly what this death meant to the DC universe, starting with 1992 Superman, The Man of Steel Volume 1, number 18.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have Kyle Rayner gets the cold shoulder. If a villain can't take down a hero, usually the first thing they go for are their loved ones. I mean, they usually are way weaker than the hero, and it's one of the only ways you can hurt them emotionally. And an emotionally unstable hero is easier to take down than someone who is clear-headed and focused. And Kyle Rayner would learn this the hard way. After flying around in space, saving the universe from all the strangest things in the galaxy, you think he would be ready to see it all. I mean, what on earth could be more shocking than meeting a race of aliens hell-bent on destroying the universe? Well, how about finding your girlfriend stuffed in a fridge? That's right, one of the greatest Green Lanterns would come home to find his girlfriend murdered and compacted right next to the condiments. That is definitely going to make it hard to love again. Coming in at number 9, we have Batgirl's got some bad manners. Swearing in comics is nothing new, but for a lot of the most popular DC characters, you will never see this pop up on the page because the comics need to be sold to a wide range of readers, which is kind of strange because you can totally have people getting their heads smashed in until they're unconscious, but no curse words. Well, in one of the issues of All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, Batgirl screams out, "Sell your poison someplace else, this arcade belongs to the effing Batgirl." Now, this shouldn't have been a big deal as the people at DC blacked out the lettering so you couldn't see what Batgirl was saying, but you could put the pieces together in your head. That's not the shocking part. The shocking part is that the blacking out of the lettering on many of the issues wasn't dark enough and most of the readers could make out what she was saying. So this was a huge screw up for DC and they had to recall a ton of the comics and put new versions on the shelves that had the swear words completely blacked out. Coming in at number 8, we have Starfire gets too sexy. Now, it's no surprise for female characters to be over-sexualized in comic books, but for this particular example, it was so blatant that Starfire fans were up in arms about this. I first got introduced to Starfire in Teen Titans, and she seemed to be like a clueless alien girl who had some pretty intense powers. In the comics, she was a pretty interesting character, well, until they spruced her up for the New 52. And by spruced her up, I mean they gave her some massive boobs and basically made her the horniest character in the Justice League. The center point of the new character was all about sexy, and it seemed that she was walking around trying to hook up with every last attractive person with a pulse. Since then, the character has been reworked to embrace her sexual side with a little bit more taste by having her come from a homeworld where monogamy isn't a thing. That sounds like a great place. But when the character first changed, people were feeling a little fiery. Coming in at number 7, we have Wiener Tentacles. Staying in the realm of the New 52, we're going to talk about the Swamp Thing, one of the quietly most powerful characters in the DC universe. And every time I see one of the covers from this comic, I get the feeling that I'm looking at a poster from a 1950s monster movie, in a good way. And the cover of issue 11 was no different. You have Swamp Thing carrying his loved one through a barrage of tentacles that seem to be attacking her. The only problem is the tentacles looked a little bit like wieners. A lot of fans started commenting about how the tube-like appendages looked a lot like those things that dangle between a dude's thighs, and it didn't help that these tentacles were a peach color, so they very much looked like a skin tone. This was so much of a problem that the comics had to be recalled and the artwork reworked. This was one of the funniest mistakes I have ever heard of. Coming in at number 6, we have who actually created Batman. If you go back through Batman's history, you usually find that a lot of people always say Bob Kane was the person who made Batman, that it was all his idea and he was the only dude who came up with all the amazing features that we know and love as the Dark Knight. Well, that's actually not true at all. Bob was the artist who created the look of Batman, which is arguably the least important part of the character. Yeah, he did make the dude look super cool, but Bill Finger was the mind behind making most of the important pieces of Batman, like the Batmobile, the different gadgets, Robin, and even the Joker. And who would Batman be without the Joker? And the writer is technically the one who came up with the idea of the character, not to discredit the artist, but we understand the difference. Well, why is it that everyone remembers Bob Kane as the guy who created Batman? Well, because he forced the people at DC to sign a contract that said he was the sole creator of Batman. So going back to the history, it's revealed that this dude was kind of a Coming at number 5, we have Jason Todd's death. If something like this happened today, it would for sure play out the same way because we know how the internet works, but I love this story because it just goes to show you how trolls have existed forever. When Jason Todd was brought into the fray as the new Robin, there came a time where he was kidnapped by the Joker and DC Comics brought it to the fans to determine his fate. They would ask the public to vote on whether or not this child would die, and the fans voted yes. Wait, what? Yeah, dude, this is what happened. When you ask the public their opinion on something that doesn't really matter, they usually choose something like this. Like when that research vessel got named Bodie McBoatface. Well, I think the shocking part is that DC stuck true to the fans' vote and they killed off Jason Todd, who would later come back as the much cooler Red Hood. Coming in at number 4, we have Joker wears his own face. You have to give it up to the writers over at DC. The Joker has been in their stable of characters since the beginning, and they find ways to keep making him crazier, like the time he had the doll maker cut off his own face and then he vanished for a year. Then he would re-emerge by breaking into Gotham PD and stealing his face back and hooking it back on with some staples, clips, and bungee cords. Talk about making an entrance. You disappear for over a year, then you come back to Gotham, kill a bunch of cops, and staple your own face back on. Bravo. Coming in at number 3, we have Sue Dibney and Dr. Light. Comics will stretch into graphic content quite often when it comes to combat and death, but there have been a few occasions where they've taken dark storylines even further. There was the case of Elongated Man's wife Sue Dibney and her encounter with Dr. Light. No one remembered this because their minds had been erased through the means of magic, but eventually it all came to the surface that Dr. Light had violated Elongated Man's wife, Sue Dibney. The reason that everyone finds out about this is because Sue Dibney was actually murdered, and the investigation of her murder is what revealed all these horrible acts. Coming in at number 2, we have Rorschach Goes Boom. The Watchmen still stands as one of the greatest comic book stories ever told. The social commentary on the Cold War timeline that is completely changed by the fact that an all-knowing super being is living in America, and you have a mystery that keeps everyone's head spinning until the last minute. Well, this all builds up when eventually the truth is out that Ozymandias orchestrated an attack on American soil to kill thousands of people and made it look like it was Dr. Manhattan. This way the human race would have a common enemy, and this would prevent nuclear war between America and the Soviets. The idea behind this is killing thousands would save billions. Well, Rorschach is one of the only characters in the book that has a solid moral compass, and he refuses to let the unjust go unpunished and sets out to tell the truth. But Dr. Manhattan sides with Ozymandias, seeing his plan as salvation, and in order to keep it in motion, he obliterates Rorschach into little pieces. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Barbara Gordon getting shot. To this day, this is one of the most controversial moments in comics. You have Barbara Gordon just chilling in her house. There's a knock at the door. She's like, oh, who could that be? She answers the door, and before she can say, why is the Joker dressed like Jason Segel and forgetting Sarah Marshall, she's getting shot. The bullet would go into her spine, putting her in a wheelchair because she lost the use of her legs and could no longer go out into the field as Batgirl. This created an interesting new element to her character when she became the Oracle, but her getting shot wasn't even the most graphic part of this encounter with the Clown Prince of Crime. He then assaults Barbara, takes explicit photos of her, and puts them into a horrifying funhouse which he subjects her father to try and make him go insane. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that that was extremely shocking and none of us saw that coming.
Number 10, Vandal Savage. So this one comes to us from the alternate world belonging to Deceased. You might be thinking, but wait a minute Amanda, isn't it a given that these characters in Deceased will die? It's deceased after all, and this world is filled with anti-life equation zombies. And yes, it is a given. But just because we know they're going to die doesn't mean the way that their death comes about or the sheer terror of how it happens can't surprise and astound us. That is exactly the case for villain Vandal Savage, part of one of the groups we follow in the Deceased Unkillable series. It turns out Vandal himself was, well, not so unkillable when Wonder Woman catches the ancient immortal off guard, busting in and almost insta-killing him before he even has time to properly react by ripping him in half. The psh is the blood splatter. Number 9. Jason Todd. I'm ranking this one low because I mean, we really all should have known to expect this death and yet somehow we didn't. Jason's reception as a character was rocky, and it was because of this that DC contemplated killing his character off altogether. To decide, they put out a bulletin in their comics asking people to call in and vote as to whether or not Jason Todd would survive or die during the story arc Death in the Family. People voted, but not thinking their vote would actually matter. They never thought DC would actually just kill Jason Todd because of a fan poll, and yet that is exactly what they did. Jason died and fans were left flabbergasted despite the fact that some of them had actually sealed his fate. Number 8. Superman. Well, this might not seem as shocking now. When Death of Superman first came out, it was so unexpected it made real world headlines. News was out that Superman was dead, one of comics' most iconic heroes of all time. How did that happen? The new and unstoppable villain Doomsday appeared on the scene and Superman was forced to put a stop to him. Or try at least. Superman succeeded, but at the cost of his life, with both hero and villain appearing to die of their injuries in the comic. The pitch for this story evolved out of a joke regarding ideas for how to boost sales, which it actually ended up successfully doing. The comic Death of Superman sold like hotcakes and also helped to boost sales for Superman's return story in Reign of the Supermen. Number 7. Elongated Man. This is one of those deaths where it felt like Sue Dibney, Elongated Man's wife, had died and comic writers felt therefore he should die also? To, I guess, keep the married couple together? You get married together, you live together, you die together? Is that what you promise when you get married to someone? Sue died in identity crisis. Her murder was the mystery readers watched the heroes unravel and attempt to solve. Shortly after, Elongated Man Ralph Dibney attempted to resurrect her and then had to fight Felix Faust, who was disguised as Nabu, but who apparently Ralph knew was actually Faust the entire time. These two fight, the Elongated Man dies, and Faust becomes imprisoned. All that so Sue and Ralph really can be together and become ghost detectives. Nope, I'm not kidding. Number 6. Green Arrow. Remember that time Oliver Queen died because he didn't want to sacrifice his arm to live? Yep. Also, why did he even have to stick his arm in this bomb in the first place? Seems like a bad move. I don't know why he really chose to do that. It's a little unclear to me in that comic. In Green Arrow issues 99 to 101, we are taken on this roller coaster of an illogical ride that ultimately ends in Ollie's death. He has his hand in a Russian bomb, and rather than let Superman deal with it any other way, he chooses to die. I don't think anyone would have expected that choice from Green Arrow, and yet one of the best strategies they came up with, well, more Superman came up with, because at this point Ollie's pretty much ready to give up it seems, is to remove Oliver's arm and fly him to safety. And then I guess return to secure the bomb before it explodes, with Green Arrow's arm still keeping the dead man switch safely in place. Assuming that would work. It isn't that Ollie wants to risk that this plan might not work though, he just doesn't want to sacrifice his arm in order to live. And so he dies. I guess if you shoot arrows with your arm, you're like, how will I live without shooting arrows? There's a lot of other things you could do, Oliver. Number 5. Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle was one of the most shocking deaths because of who was pulling the trigger. At this point we might now see Maxwell Lord as a dangerous and more villainous figure not to be messed with, but at the time he was believed to be an ally of the Justice League, not someone who would betray them. So this death caught many off guard. What had happened was that Blue Beetle discovered that Lord had been against them the whole time and was using his position to gather intel on superheroes and basically destroy the Justice League International from the inside out. Maxwell still seemed to see Blue Beetle as a friend though, as he did offer him the chance to join him and protect the world against the superhuman threat, but Ted Kord refused and as such was killed by Lord. Number 4. Silver St. Cloud. This death was very shocking at the time, although to be fair, we should know that if it seems like Batman is about to get a happily ever after moment, it's too good to be true. And something is likely about to go sideways. Such was the case with Silver St. Cloud. Silver was a Gotham socialite who dated Bruce Wayne way back in the 70s in the comics, but the two ended up splitting when she learned that Bruce Wayne was actually Batman. Silver couldn't stand the thought of losing Bruce and of him constantly being in danger. Years later, however, she would walk back into Bruce's life and end up back in his arms once more, ready to accept and come to understand and respect his responsibilities as Batman. Bruce even considered hanging up his cowl and retiring from the vigilante life for Silver so that they could start a life all their own together. Unfortunately, just as this seemed like it would be a reality, Batman's new partner, Baphomet, was revealed to be villain Automatopoeia, tragically killing Silver instantly with a slit while Bruce's back was turned. Just, Batman, if you're ever gonna be happy, don't trust it. Number 3. Batman. This one is pretty recent, so if you don't want some recent going-ons of the comics to be spoiled, you might want to skip this point. Alright, now that you've been warned, let's continue on. Recently in Death Metal, our heroes have discovered the Perpetua is planning to harness the energy of 3 major DC crises by building them again and making them recur. As such, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman each set out 2 separate ones with the hopes of saving those lives endangered by this plot. Black Lantern Batman is tasked with handling Crisis on Infinite Earths, but realizes shortly after arriving that he's already too late. He finds himself coming undone, dissolving into antimatter. It's a brutal page, but what's more unexpected is a few pages later when all our heroes are all back to normal and together again. What? Number 2. Poison Ivy. Ivy's death in Heroes in Crisis literally came out of nowhere, and if no one saw it coming, it's just because of how fast it happened. Huh. Pun intended. Ivy was one of the few killed in the Sanctuary Massacre, accidentally killed by hero Wally West when he lost control. Fortunately, Wally was able to bring Ivy back using a rose she'd given to Harley Quinn in order to, in essence, regrow her. She came back with a whole new look as well. However, even though her death ended up being temporary, it was still pretty shocking and unexpected, considering how popular Poison Ivy has been throughout comics as both a villain and an anti-hero. Number 1. Alex DeWitt. If you read comics of any kind, you'll likely know who Alex DeWitt is. Her name has become almost synonymous with the comic book term fridging, coined by writer Gail Simone. The term even has its own website, which Simone made in 1999 for the sole purpose of documenting various other times women in comics were fridged. In other words, female characters being sacrificed, depowered, or assaulted for the advancement of a male character's plot. Alexandra DeWitt, known for being Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, was one of the most shocking deaths of this kind that helped to basically highlight the way female characters were often used and treated in comics. Alex was killed by Major Force, a villain who strangled her and then stuffed her in the fridge, leaving her for Kyle to find upon his return. Unexpected for many. Number 10. Who is the Beyond Corporation? The Beyond Corporation, to expand on them and introduce them to you a little bit more, is basically the mastermind behind this whole operation. They seem to be wanting to turn the role of Spider-Man into a corporate gig. They managed to get their hands on the Spider-Man name and trademark, and as a result have selected Ben Reilly to act as their own Spider-Man. Instead of approaching the Spider-Man, Peter Parker, or also the Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Why? Well, we might get into the layers of that a little bit later, but Beyond basically tells Ben that they chose him because he has a strong will, and that's what they're looking for, someone who can basically get things done. They give Ben a swanky apartment, a whole team of comms to help him in the field, and super advanced tech to assist him in his heroics. They also send him out on missions, both to help and save the public, and to help and save Beyond at times. Also, honestly, if you want to be introduced to Beyond before jumping into issue 75 of Amazing Spider-Man, where this story begins, you can check out the final story in issue 74 of ASM, the final issue of the previous run. And why not flip back a page before you jump into the final story? There's a really fantastic Spider-Man recap for you to enjoy. It's really great. I loved it. I want to frame it somewhere. It's so cute. Number 9. Dreams. Something that I think is important to note when it comes to this story is the weird recurring dreams that seem to be showing up consistently, and the possibility that Peter Parker and Ben Reilly are sharing these same dreams. The recurring one that we keep coming back to in terms of themes and just what actually happens in the dream involves Uncle Ben. This is a particularly important moment in the story as it starts the whole thing off in issue number 75 of the Amazing Spider-Man series. At first it seems as though Peter is talking about a dream he is having, but later we see that Ben seems to be plagued with the exact same dream, featuring a faceless Uncle Ben Parker. Usually lengthy stories like this start off with something that sets the stage for the themes and often hint at what will be built up, where the story is moving towards. The dream thematically seems to deal with acknowledging who you are, confronting that, embracing that, and ultimately deals with legacy, something that both Ben and Peter seem to be struggling with at the time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear more about Spider-Man Beyond, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I got a lot more facts to throw at you. There's a lot going on in this story. Number 8. Ben is back. Ben is back, baby, but what does this mean for his character? Where is he coming from? Where did we last see him? These are all great questions. Let me try to answer some of them for you by giving you the full picture. Last we saw Ben, he was fighting to redeem himself after becoming a villain and taking up the mantle of Jackal. As Jackal, Ben was working to do what he thought was right by bringing back a bunch of dead folks as clones and trying to perfect the cloning process. This would help not just him, but a ton of other folks returned as clones. Of course, he kinda ended up creating a solution which allowed him to exert control over said clones. As Peter saw it, Jackal Ben had things kinda twisted. What he saw was all the power with none of the responsibility. In the end, Peter defeated Ben, refusing to join him, and Ben realized the error of his ways and fought to atone for his mistakes. At one point, he had his sins completely cleansed, as they were explained as happening because of basically a corruption of his psyche. Now he's back, but he doesn't seem to be too much worse the wear, considering all that happened more recently in his past. In fact, his time as Jackal remains kind of untouched for much of this story, although Ben does seem to be struggling emotionally. Number 7. Forge multitasks. I love Forge so much. And I love this new X-Men team we've gotten out of the last election at the Hellfire Gala. It is so awesome. It's just like the more I think about this team, the more I'm like, this is actually like a really cool team. This is the moment that has me itching to read more of this team together though, despite the fact that I believe, sadly, Jerry Dugan is actually going to be leaving this book. In issue number 13 of the X-Men, which is still written by Dugan at this point, we get a look into how the Eternals attacked Krakoa and attempted to defeat the Mutant Island. The Eternals sick giant kaiju-like beings on Krakoa, also Eternals themselves. These giant Eternals are known as the Hex, that's the name of their subgroup. The Hex attack Krakoa, and Forge is not even intimidated into donning battle armor in response. That's just so Forge. Instead, he brings out the big guns and he waits for the right moment to strike while lounging in tropical attire and sipping a drink out of a pineapple. It's a fantastic moment that feels super Forge. Forge successfully takes out one of the giant Eternals that looks like a dragon. Unfortunately, he does only have one magic nanite bullet, and you know, that was it. So the X-Men are gonna have to figure out what to do about the rest of the army of Hex who are still headed towards the island. Number 6. Beyond's true motives. So, why does Beyond really want Ben Reilly as their Spider-Man? And do they really just want to make the world a better place, or do they have ulterior motives? How do they make money? And what's really going on in the scientific and experimental sandwich department? Those poor sandwiches! Someone free them, please. As time goes on, Beyond becomes more and more suspicious, and not just to you or I, the readers. I mean, I think we're all suspicious from the beginning, right? But also for Ben and Dr. Octopus. After Doc Ock's team up with Aunt May, he's hot on the trail of Beyond, who he believes has stolen his work. Ben is sent after Otto to apprehend him after he gets his hand on a very valuable asset of Beyond's, a drive with sensitive and pertinent information, which Beyond refuses to fill Ben in about when it comes to what the contents of this drive are. Ben manages to defeat Doc Ock, but Otto gives him a choice. He has made it so that Ben can actually access the drive's files without Beyond knowing. Ben can either look at the drive or simply return it without taking a peek at all. Of course, Ben is already suspicious at this point, so he chooses to look. He does not like what he finds. It turns out Ben wasn't chosen for his strong will, just the opposite actually. He was chosen because Beyond considers him malleable, due to him being psychologically compromised. Number 5. Vigilantism outlawed. Despite the fact that Daredevil made Fisk promise to stop his pursuit of vigilantes, Wilson instead has continued on that path, but decided to outlaw only those who refuse to join up with the government. In other words, if you are a supervillain or a superhero who is a willing ally yourself with the city of New York and with Mayor Fisk, you are pretty much fine. But if you decide that joining up with a villain like Kingpin is not something you're interested in, you are considered an outlaw by the mayor, government, and law enforcement. Number 4. Miles gets served. And I don't mean he gets served some like delicious hamburgers or anything tasty like that. I mean he gets served in the legal sense. Miles Morales has also some Beyond tie-ins you'll be happy to hear, and to find out what's going on with him in the Beyond storyline, you can check out his own series from issues 33 to 36. Miles also makes an appearance in issue 81 of ASM, where he and Ben duke it out before teaming up to take on monster/villain Rhizome. However, while Ben ultimately decides not to tell Miles he should consider changing his name after Beyond told him to, because Beyond only wants Ben to use the Spider-Man mantle, and well, I mean, they do own it, Miles does later on get served by Beyond, unfortunately, as we find out in his own series. And that is a whole thing that he has to deal with in his own series, on top of dealing with other hero-related problems. It's a lot going on for Miles right now. He just had his own clone saga, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. Number 3. Heartless Magneto. Magneto is killed during the events of X-Men Red issue number 5. He puts up a good fight, but in the end, Uranos wins, getting him right in the heart. But here's the thing about Arakko. As we learn in that issue, you should always confirm the kill when you're dealing with anybody from Arakko. These are hard mutants cut from a different cloth, and so it is no surprise that, other than Iska, a few people are going to survive the brutality of this, especially as Uranos only has a limited time on the planet and foolishly does not confirm each and every kill, which, you know, he probably should have done that. A few do survive, including Xylo and Lotus Logos of the Great Ring, and of course, Magneto. Magneto may have been punched through the heart and no longer have one, but he has his powers and iron in his blood, and that is enough for him to basically will his blood to keep moving through his body, using the iron to kind of create, I don't know, like it's just like a glowing orb, but to me I kind of think of it as like an engine that'll replace his heart. Of course, he'd probably have to keep thinking about it because he'd be using his power to move the blood. Magneto is just always being a badass is basically the moral of the story, and it's so cool. It's so cool to read. Number 2. Black Cat and Mary Jane team up. Black Cat Cat and Mary Jane need to team up to go on a heist? Black Cat and Mary Jane is a team up we've been waiting for a long time. And while these two often do not get along, I personally am here for the day when Felicia and MJ can just like be friends instead of just fighting over Peter all the time. Maybe this team up is a step in that direction, maybe not, but it sure is a fun one. If you need more reasons to read Beyond, this is one of them. Bam! Read this issue and enjoy the team up of these two. Remember, this is an event where all the tie-ins are relevant. Peter's life may even hang in the balance, but you'll have to read it to find out. Number 1, The Unraveling of Ben Reilly. Remember how I said that Ben's time as Jackal seems to be mainly untouched? Well, later on in this story we find out kinda why that is. In issue 86 of ASM, we learn that Ben actually allowed Beyond to wipe his memory of his time as Jackal, which is why he didn't really know that his therapist, Dr. Kafka, was actually a clone, one he himself created. Yeah, Kafka had actually been working to try and rebuild Ben's framework when it comes to his mind, because the whole mind wipe thing is kind of ill-advised in her professional opinion. It's dangerous as it could cause Ben's personality to collapse because he's a clone. And well, I think you know where we're going with this revelation. After Ben learns more about Beyond's motives and begins to question who and what he's really working for and why, they decide it best if they remove recent memories to protect themselves from Ben's suspicions, and to protect Ben, I guess, so that he can keep working for them. And yeah, it doesn't go well. Memories beyond what they are scrubbing seem to unravel and disappear. What will Ben be like when he comes to? I really think you should jump into the story with us. Number 10, Infinity Wars. Infinity is a word you want to get familiar with when it comes to Marvel events. It comes up a lot. So does the word war, actually. Infinity Wars is not to be confused with Infinity War, which was a 1992 event that was already reinterpreted for the MCU. Infinity Wars is an event from 2018 where Gamora ends up gathering the Infinity Stones for her own purpose, becoming a villain and taking up the name of Requiem. She ends up defeating Thanos and Adam Warlock using the stones, and also traps all of her universe in the Soul Gem, folding it in half and merging the souls of all its beings therefore together to create the pocket dimension known as Warp World. While Gamora goes on her own quest and other multiversal heroes attempt to stop her, in Warp World, Loki bands together his own team of heroes, setting on a mission to retrieve the Warp World version of the Infinity Stones so that they might save the world and defeat Devondra, a soul-devouring villain within the Soul Gem, who would feed basically on all their souls, if, you know, they didn't do anything about it. Eating people's souls. Number 9, Avengers vs. X-Men. Oh boy, I have a lot of feelings about this event. It's kind of complex, but ultimately though, the idea of Avengers and X-Men needing to duke it out over something, despite both being heroic groups who should in theory therefore be on the same side, it's tantalizing to me, that idea. There are some things about the way this event was executed that I'm not here for, but overall I think the premise is super interesting, and like Civil War, which came before it, I think the idea of heroes getting into a conflict with each other is quite compelling, especially with two groups that are, you know, as iconic as Avengers and X-Men when it comes to Marvel. In Avengers vs. X-Men, these two teams face off because the Phoenix Force is headed for Earth, specifically Hope Summers, the mutant messiah who is now all grown up, having been raised through time by Cable. The X-Men are willing to wait and see what happens, but the Avengers do not want Hope to become the Phoenix, and are vehemently anti-Phoenix. Iron Man is unable to destroy the Phoenix, and his attempt only succeeds in splitting the entity into 5 parts, which bond with other mutants and create the Phoenix 5. A bunch of crazy stuff happens, but in the end, Hope merges with the Phoenix and finds herself overwhelmed by power. Avengers Scarlet Witch and X-Men Hope Summers come together to banish the Phoenix Force in the end, seemingly destroying it. For a while, at least. You can't really ever get rid of the Phoenix Force, it always comes back. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you are loving the channel, please head on over to Facebook, where we also are, and give us a like and follow and do all the fun Facebook stuff. We've also lots of cool Facebooky things coming for you. In a good way, not coming for you in a bad way, just to be clear. Number 8. 10 of Swords. 10 of Swords was such a ridiculous and fun event. Oh my goodness, what a roller coaster. I loved this event. It was not quite what I expected it to be, and yet in other ways, it kinda was. X of Swords, pronounced 10 of Swords in relation to the tarot card, is a mutant event about a contest of champions that is held to settle a dispute between the mutants of Krakoa and the mutant and Amenthi of Araco. The two sides each have their own champions prophesied for them, with each needing to present the right prophesied matching blade in order to compete. So of course, going into this, you'd think it's going to be a dueling contest. It's definitely going to be a dueling contest, there's going to be lots of sword fights. But hey, it's so much more than that. They have contests of all kinds, and being that the White Witch Opal Luna Saturnine of the Starlight Citadel is in charge of it, it's just mainly a really weird and wild time that ends up in just a straight, all-out battle, which is also really epic. So yeah, what an experience. Also for that event, I read like almost everything leading up to it, so that was a fun event for me. I was really invested.
Coming in at number 7, we have She-Hulk, another Disney Plus miniseries. Bringing back Mark Ruffalo in the role of Bruce Banner and debuting Tatiana Maslany in the title role after a tremendous performance in the Canadian TV show Orphan Black, this show looks poised to introduce a second Gamma Green hero to the Avengers team. And given the fact that we haven't even gotten a standalone story with Mark Ruffalo as Hulk yet, we're hoping that this miniseries will finally give the MCU a good in-depth story about the struggle that the Hulk characters have in balancing their multiple lives. And with such talented actors leading the cast, that looks to be exactly what we're gonna get.
Number 6, Infinity. An event that holds a special place in my heart is Infinity. When it comes to modern events, it was one of the first ones that I read. And I read it because I was reading Captain Marvel at the time and I needed to know what happened next with Carol. So I kind of just fell into it and, didn't read a lot of the context for this event, and yet surprisingly came out the other side with a lot of love and appreciation for this event, despite not being deeply invested in all of those other titles. Infinity is where we see the Avengers and really all of Earth as well as the universe face certain doom. Dun dun dun, as per usual with most cosmic events, when they face off with the universe's oldest race, the Builders. The Builders are looking to basically wipe the universe clean, traveling around the cosmos and destroying various worlds. This isn't so much because they are intrinsically evil or anything, but because they claim they created the worlds and civilizations, and now it is their responsibility in a sense to destroy them and finish that cycle. Meanwhile, on Earth, our heroes believe that Thanos is attempting to once again unite the Infinity Gems, but it's revealed that he's really trying to locate his mysterious son, who we later know to be Thane, so that he can destroy Thane, which is also a big part of this event. Infinity leads into Time Runs Out, which leads into Secret Wars, and so it's also an intricate part of that bigger story. Number 5, The Alliance. The Kree and Skrulls have come together. I know, say what? Aren't they supposed to be sworn enemies? Yes, they are. The Skrull and Kree have feuded on and off since what feels like forever, but this time they unite to take on a common enemy, the Celestial Messiah, also known as Sequoia or Koya, and his allies, the Kotati. Empire Fantastic Four issue 0 also served to remind us that the Kree/Skrull war had also obviously previously ended. And now as such, Skrull and Kree have come to Earth and Earth's moon, where this feud started years ago, in order to defeat their enemies. Earth somehow seems to always be the center of honestly almost every cosmic war or disaster. 'Cause comics. Number 4, House of M. House of M is another great event, one that dramatically changed the world, which is actually kind of rare for events, although a lot of them, claim to change the entire world or the narrative of comics for years to come. Most events don't actually live up to that claim very much. House of M did though. In this story, Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, suffers a mental break after her children are taken from her, and she learns of how that was basically all covered up. Yeah, not a great look. Feeling isolated and alone, Scarlet Witch creates an alternate world where she attempts to make many prominent friends, allies, and heroes happy by giving them what she believes they want. However, when it is revealed that this world is not real but was created by Wanda, the heroes choose to rebel against her. Disappointed by everyone's reaction and frustrated beyond belief that people still see her as a danger and a monster despite her intent here, Scarlet Witch utters 3 devastating words: no more mutants. Yeah, that's what you get, Magneto. That's what you get. Being so awful. And she's like, I tried to give you everything and you're still not happy with me. Jeez.
Coming in at number 3, we have Moon Knight. For years, Oscar Isaac was one of the biggest fan picks to play the role of Mark Spector if there was ever a Moon Knight MCU project, and next year, that's finally becoming a reality. While we've only gotten to see a brief teaser trailer so far, this Disney Plus series looks to be bringing the dark and mystical drama that people love about Moon Knight in the first place, alongside a killer performance by Oscar Isaac as the multiple personality possessing superhero. This looks like it could be a great introductory performance for a character that we can't wait to see bouncing off of other sarcastic characters in the MCU. Plus, you know, Oscar Isaac being pretty hot really helps.
Number 2, Hellfire Gala. I mean, you know how much I love some fancy nerd fashion, and I also just love the elegance and drama that is this very mutant-based event. Now granted, to have the Hellfire Gala, we're going to, need mutants in the MCU, but we know at some point that is coming to us. The question is just, when? When is that coming? Hopefully soon. Hellfire Gala is a new seemingly yearly event which varies in scale. Last year it spanned all mutant books pretty much, and saw the mutants open up the island of Krakoa to welcome dignitaries, celebrities, heroes, and villains from the world and galaxy all over to visit and, well, basically just kind of show off. The Hellfire Gala is hosted mainly by Emma Frost, one of the heads of the Hellfire Trading Company. This year it will be opened up even more, with non-mutant superhumans also getting in on the red carpet / fashion aspect of the event, attending in outfits that highlight their iconic look, but that also slay at the same time. Very important. Number 1, DC vs Marvel. I think I can confidently say that this is an event we'd all love to see take flight. I know this because every time we talk about Amalgam comics or Amalgam characters, there is just so much love, support, and celebration amongst you, our Nerd Squad community, in the comments. That's right, I keep an eye on the comments every now and then. I'm there, I'm just watching. And I love Amalgam too. I love how fun it is. I love the idea of these two similar but seemingly opposing worlds coming together to duke it out, only to realize that they actually maybe they need to actually band together. Maybe they're both cool. Maybe they can just shake hands at the end. The premise for the event was that two cosmic entities that represented each respective universe decided to challenge each other to find out which universe was better. They would create challenges for each world's champions to test both sides, and whichever one came out on top would get to remain, while the other world would be eliminated, ceasing to exist thereafter. Number 10, Mike Murdock. Mike Murdock used to simply be a disguise that Matt would use whenever he needed to go undercover. Mike was essentially Matt pretending to be his long-lost twin brother, Mike. His twin brother who wasn't blind, but did happen to look just like Matt. This was a guise that Matt would slip in and out of for years whenever it was useful or convenient for him to do so. However, recently in the comics, Mike was actually given a full life of his own when the Inhuman Reader accidentally used his powers to bring Mike to life. For real, allowing him to exist separate from Matt, believing he was in fact Matt Murdock's brother. Long-lost twin brother. Reader described Mike as a fragment, and initially sought to erase Mike's existence. In fact, Matt himself also attempted to do so as well, but in the end decided against it and chose to let Mike go after backing him into a corner, unable to get rid of the fragment who had become essentially Matt's real-life twin brother. I mean, when you have a twin brother, why let that go? Just let it be a thing. Mike appears in Devil's Reign, and it is important to be aware that he is now a separate entity from Matt, one who also allied himself with Fisk in the past for protection, and is good friends with Butch, who is believed to be Fisk's illegitimate son and is currently the new kingpin of New York. Number 9, Elektra as Daredevil. More recently in the comics, Elektra has actually become Daredevil as well. This all went down as Matt Murdock was preparing to go to prison. To keep Hell's Kitchen safe, he'd set up a plan where Tony Stark could bid to buy the borough of New York. This plan, however, didn't go exactly as he'd hoped, when instead Elektra decided to outbid Stark for the area. Despite the fact that she had recently remembered Daredevil's true identity and had an argument with Matt about him surrendering himself and going to prison, Elektra offered to be the one to protect Hell's Kitchen, while Matt did what he felt he must do. After Matt went to prison, Elektra took up the mantle of Daredevil. So in case you were wondering why there are two Daredevils and why Elektra was DD as well, here's your answer. And something important to note going into this series is that there is Matt Murdock DD and Elektra DD, so 2 Daredevils. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Devil's Reign, it is still ongoing and there's lots still to talk about, so be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Mayor Fisk. In case you weren't aware, Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, is now mayor, and has been for a little while in the comics. He ended up being elected as the mayor of New York in part by winning over the masses, but mainly by fixing the vote to ensure his victory. He promised the people of New York that he would outlaw vigilantism, and fight to bring self-titled heroes like the Punisher and even soups like Spider-Man to justice. Daredevil pretended to join Fisk, but intended to use his position to betray Wilson and capture him, banding together with fellow heroes to take him down. However, this plan didn't go quite according to plan. Fisk was expecting such a thing to happen and instead had the heroes arrested. For a time he was in a coma and Matt Murdock took over as mayor, but once Fisk recovered, he took back the title and the responsibilities of the office. And Wilson Fisk also has designs on another, even bigger government role and office for himself, which you'll find out about in this event. Number 7, the hottest couple returns. Aunt May and Doc Ock, of course. Oh, did you think I was going to say like Spider-Man and Black Cat? No. That isn't a thing currently. But Aunt May and Doc Ock do get a pretty steamy and fun team up in issue 80 Point Bay. What, you don't believe me that they're the hottest couple in comics? Pfft, please, it says it right on the cover. Covers never lie to us, right? Right? This team up involves Aunt May and Doc Ock getting together to help save Peter's life, with May calling in a favor. Also, I love ruthless and determined Aunt May in this whole plot point. Aunt May is kind of a badass here. This tie-in, by the way, is important to the plot. All of them kind of are for Beyond. So if you're wanting to join us on this roller coaster of a ride, make sure you read the tie-ins and all the Point Bays. I like to call them Point Bays, but B is also an acceptable pronunciation in my books, considering it's short for Beyond, so B. I just like saying Point Bay. Number 6, Typhoid Mary Fisk. A while back, Wilson Fisk was attempting to use newfound power to bring back his beloved Vanessa, but was dissuaded from this plan when he was forced to consider if his wife Vanessa would have actually wanted to be brought back. And I mean, let's say she did. Would she even want to see Fisk, let alone be with him? As a result of this revelation, Fisk attempted to resurrect his and Vanessa's son Richard instead. This didn't work out as he planned, but the good news is that he found a way to move forward with his love life. The fact that Daredevil's identity was also wiped clean from his mind and his personal files likely also helped this love connection to grow. That is right, Fisk ended up partnering up romantically with his longtime right-hand woman and partner in crime, Typhoid Mary. The two of them even got married and now are partners in every sense of the word. The only problem is that Mary's trauma, or perhaps something else, seems to be blocking out some of the memories of their romantic past. Number 5, the 5 are broken. Wow, I didn't even intend to put the 5 at 5, but here we are. When Krakoa is attacked, Jack of Knives is also deployed to kill as many as he can and of course get the 5, who Prime Eternal Druig knows about from his alliance with Orcus. The shocking part is that they actually succeed in this. Egg falls and is unable to be protected during this attack. The good news is Egg had made some extra eggs before he died, meaning that the 5, even without one of their key members, was able to actually bring him back to life, thank goodness. But for a moment, the 5 were broken, and for a few moments upon reading Judgment Day issue number 1, you likely were like me and you lived in fear that the resurrection days of Krakoa were over. It was a really close one there for a second. Number 4, Kingpin's Thunderbolts. Something we actually also saw happening during the King in Black event was Kingpin pulling together his own team of Thunderbolts after acquiring the team name. His version of the Thunderbolts, like many other iterations of the team, features supervillains who are acting as heroes. Kind of. Of course, in this case, they are supervillains who are acting as heroes on behalf of Kingpin himself, a major supervillain in the comics. So take that with a grain of salt. But all in all, it's pretty interesting. This isn't Hawkeye's Thunderbolts team. The Thunderbolts here are also working with the police of New York City in an attempt to keep order and to take down any illegal vigilantes who are out on the streets. Kingpin's Thunderbolts team, since it was first brought together, has included Rhino, Taskmaster, Star, Mr. Fear, Bartrock the Leaper, Snakehead, Ampere, Man-Bull, Fool Killer, Mr. Hyde, Grizzly, Figment, US Agent, Shocker, Dr. Octopus, Electro, and Agony. Many teammates have also died during their time serving on Kingpin's Thunderbolts, so he doesn't have a great track record for keeping people alive right now. and hence why there's been so many of them. They come on, they die, he's like, let me get somebody else. Number 3, Queen Goblin. Queen Goblin is a new character who was introduced in ASM issue 88. But who is behind the mask? If it wasn't spoiled for you in the solicits, this is a revelation that may just rock the entire Beyond event. Still, I'm not gonna spoil this one for you. I also talked about Queen Goblin on my top 10 goblins list if you want to learn more about the design and the idea for her character, but without any spoilers still. But I will say that her identity could be something that will shake the Beyond Corporation to its very core. So definitely a character appearance that you won't want to miss, and you'll probably be very interested in what she's up to. Number 2, Purple Man. So how is Kingpin managing to get all the people of New York to stand with him, considering how wild everything is getting, and how he's attempting to take on some of the most beloved superheroes of New York? Well, he has more than a few tricks up his sleeve when it comes to his control over New York City. One very powerful one is the Purple Man, aka Zebediah Kilgrave, who despite seemingly dropping dead in issue 17 of the 2016 Jessica Jones series in a final moment of atonement, is actually still alive. I know. He's got a really powerful healing factor, and it turned out that one of his purple children actually manipulated Captain Marvel into merely thinking she had thrown his corpse up into the sun so that he could use his father's corpse for his own means. This inevitably ended up leading to Purple Man escaping, ending up back in prison at the Raft, and then ultimately falling into the hands of Mayor Wilson Fisk, who used Kilgrave's influence for his own means. Number 1, the Avengers mayoral candidate. Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock haven't been the only ones seemingly showing an interest in politics and acting as mayor of New York, or at least aiming to become mayor of New York perhaps. The Avengers also have their own plan when it comes to beating Mayor Fisk. They want to nominate their own eligible candidate to become mayor of New York. Initially, Iron Man's plan was to run for mayor as billionaire Tony Stark, but fortunately they came up with something even better. Their current pick for candidate just so happens to be fan favorite street level hero Luke Cage. You know, I also want to see Luke Cage as mayor of New York, so I'm really hoping that this plan works. That sounds like an awesome story in and of itself that I would definitely want to read. They're going to have their work cut out for them, unfortunately, when it comes to fighting against Fisk, who, as we said, is using Purple Man's influence to bend the city to his own will, and important people around him to his own will. But I think nominating Cage for mayor is a very solid plan, so long as they can find a way to get New York somewhat unbrainwashed and back to normal. Hopefully. They're gonna have to probably take a lot of stuff away from Fisk before this will be possible, but I believe in Luke Cage as mayor. Number 10, Masked Raider. You may have noticed a mysterious figure pop up in this event near the beginning, the Masked Raider. We don't know yet if this is the same Masked Raider that we were first introduced to though. Probably not, unless he was resurrected, as the original Masked Raider was Jim Gardley, a cattle rancher equipped with the Eternity Mask who first appeared in Marvel Comics issue 1 in 1939, and he has since died. He got shot a bunch. The Eternity Mask grants whoever wields it enough power to allow them to equal those they come up against. The Masked Raider appeared right at the beginning of the ramp up of this event, tied into a murder mystery needing to be solved, which sets up some of the exposition for Empire in incoming issue number 1. It has also been teased that we'll be getting a new Masked Raider title in 2020. The true identity of this Masked Raider remains unknown thus far, but what we do know is a man named Jerome Hamilton, possibly a reference to vigilante Blind Justice, most likely this is Blind Justice who we're talking about, was the one responsible for giving this version of the character the Eternity Mask. Unless there's another Jerome Hamilton just wandering around, which there could be. Who knows? Could be a common name on Earth. Number 9, Null. Empire really is an event that was ambitious. Due to the global pandemic, some of the tie-ins have had to be cancelled, but originally this event was going to be one of the biggest yet, and even with the cancellations, it's still huge. Almost everyone is involved in this event, including the weird god of the symbiotes from space, Null. It seems that Null is declaring a space war of his own. Having been awakened following the events of Absolute Carnage, he is rampaging across the galaxy currently with an army of symbiotic dragons that used to be one entity known as the sentient symbiotic planet known as Clintar. However, he himself is also likely to have some kind of interaction with at least one member of the Kree at some point, as he is being hunted by Wraith, an Exolon-infected Kree assassin named Zach Dell. Number 8, Conflict with Atlantis. Another thing that you might want to understand if you haven't been as involved or up to speed with the Avengers lately and what's been going on with Namor and Atlantis is that right now the people of the sea and the people of the land aren't really getting along so well. The feud is one that started and has kind of continued and been on and off since 2018, when Namor blamed the surface for the death of young Atlanteans who had run away and suffocated on the surface world, with no humans offering to help them. How rude. They died, those poor young Atlanteans. And Namor decided he'd had it. He declared war. And since then, things have been rocky between the Avengers and Atlantis. And just between Atlantis and the surface world even. The Earth being as divided as it is right now could prove for some challenging times ahead when all the galactic threats that we're expecting finally arrive. Cause you know, you kinda wanna be unified for that stuff. Number 7. King in Black. King in Black was an epic event years in the making. Leading up to it, we also had another exhilarating event, Absolute Carnage. The premise for King in Black was that Null had finally awoken and was on his way to Earth. King in Black was about the short but building tension as the heroes of Earth awaited Null's arrival, and then what finally happened when he did arrive to Earth. Mainly, I think many of us want to see this event because we want to see Null, god of symbiotes, and all his symbiote dragons, which are also super cool and powerful. Number 6. Killer Trees. What if I just left it there and I was like, that's all you need to know, there's killer trees. Now, I'll explain it to you, sorry about that. You may have noticed some trees sprouting up inside people and killing them. What are these trees? Where did they come from? We later find out that these trees are part of the reason that Skrull and Kree are joining together to attack Earth, as these killer trees are actually connected to the Kotati. The Kotati are a sentient and secretive tree people. They are from Hala and actually evolved alongside the Kree. While Kree are aggressive and focused on domination, Kotati are normally a peaceful people. Years ago, the Skrull arrived on Hala and offered a technology exchange, or really a gift of technology, as the Skrull have pretty much always been pretty technologically advanced. To see which race was more worthy of their technology, they had a competition. 17 members from each race were placed on the blue area of the moon, and forced into a competition to see who could advance more quickly. This would end up leading to a feud between the Kree and Kotati, and later the Skrull and the Kotati, which would end up causing the Kotati to become somewhat aggressive, believing that they had suffered many injustices at the hands of both of these races, which, to be fair, kinda sounds like they have. In Empire Avengers issue number 0, we discover that the Kotati are plotting to seek revenge on the Kree and Skrull empires, but also potentially seek to exterminate all animal life as well, including all life on Earth. What?
Coming in at number 5, we have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. While talking about this film will always have a tinge of sadness to it following the tragic passing away of Black Panther star Chadwick Boseman in 2020, this sequel to one of Marvel's biggest hits has promised to honor Boseman's legacy as T'Challa without recasting him or replacing him with special effects. With much of the cast of the first movie returning and the focus placed on the other heroes of Wakanda such as Okoye and Shuri, we can rest assured that this movie will have just as much love and care put into it as the first film, perhaps even more so out of respect to T'Challa's legacy.
Number 4. Hammers. Okay, so this might not be as needed to know as some of the other points here, but it's really cool, and it's the cool stuff that helps get people interested in events, so I thought it was important that I share it with you. Hammers are becoming a thing again in Empire issue 1, and while yes, we've seen other heroes wield them like Thor and Ronan, and then there was the Fear Itself event where lots of people were wielding hammers, good and bad. This time around, we get one new really cool one. This hammer is gifted to She-Hulk by the Kotati and allows She-Hulk to literally channel her rage through her hammer so that she can be herself and focus once more. So once again, we get the brilliance that is Jennifer Walters combined with the strength and power that is Hulk. Yes! Number 3. Secret Wars. 2015 Secret Wars is another event we need to have in the MCU, especially with the implications we have in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I don't even know how you write events like this into the comics anymore, because any hints you drop as a screenwriter have to be like massive implications, at least that's how fans are going to interpret it as to what's going to come next. So you must need someone like Feige either tweaking after the fact when it comes to scripts, or you must be going into it with the idea communicated to you before, like what's going to be happening and coming up, so you have to like somehow write that into your script. I don't know. We learn in Multiverse of Madness that incursions are something that could be headed our way and are a huge threat. When it comes to Secret Wars, That's what this event basically spins out of. And time runs out, the incursions ended up happening despite everyone's attempts to stop them. However, Dr. Doom stepped up to the plate, utilizing the powers of Molecule Man and his own confidence and ego to save the world by creating his own battle world, a patchwork version of all the realities in the multiverse that combined together. In the end, Reed Richards would take the power of Molecule Man from Dr. Doom to undo his handiwork and return the multiverse to relative normalcy instead. But it was quite a wild ride. That whole event is pretty bonkers. I'm here for it if we get it. Number 2, the Celestial Messiah. So who is the Celestial Messiah anyway? Sequoia has only made a few brief appearances, so most of us likely didn't recognize him when he was mentioned in Empire Avengers issue number 0. But despite the fact that he has only appeared just over a dozen times in the comics since his introduction and later full appearance in the 80s, first in Silver Surfer and later in Fantastic Four, Koya is prophesied to be the bearer of great change in the universe. A Kotati prophecy predicted the coming of a celestial messiah who will grow to have great power and sway over the universe, and be born of a perfect male member of the Kotati and their perfect mate. In this case, it is revealed that the perfect female mate turns out to be Mantis of Guardians of the Galaxy, who agreed to take part in the prophecy and become the bearer of the celestial messiah, taking up her role in the prophecy as the celestial Madonna. Since being born, Sequoia grew and developed various superpowers, even managing to connect and tap into the power cosmic as he grew older. Number 1. Division of Heroes? While the Kree and Skrull are uniting and coming together, they need someone to lead this hybrid army. For the role of ruler and leader of their assault, they ended up choosing Avenger member Hulkling, aka Teddy Altman, who happens to be the son of a Kree warrior, the famous and original Captain Marvel, and the Skrull Princess Anel. What does this mean? It is possible that Teddy also being on Earth and being raised there could lead to either more division amongst Earth's heroes, or even more division internally within the Skrull and Kree alliance. Of course, this could also seek to unite all 3 factions together, but then again, the Avengers seem to be pretty close with the Kotati right now. Only time will tell how having Hulkling assume the role of ruler and taking back his Skrull name of Prince Dorek VIII will affect what happens in the story and crossover event as it unfolds. Number 10. The Machine. Well, this is technically a big moment and revelation from the Eternals series by Kieran Gillen that precedes the AXE event. Some of you may not have been reading Eternals, so I figured it was still an important one to include here because it's really relevant and really cool. But also, go read the latest Eternals series because it is amazing, and honestly it's too short-lived for how awesome it was. You should go read it. I wish Kieran Gillen could just keep writing Eternals for, I don't know, into the foreseeable future. But I gotta say, I am happy that we have him on Immortal X-Men, and you know, if we gotta have one or the other, I get it, but Eternals was so good. In Eternals, we learned about how the Machine actually has its own personality and its own voice. The Machine being the thing that actually resurrects the Eternals every time they die. And honestly, I think it has become one of my favorite characters in the Eternals series. Machine is so cool and so sassy sometimes. In AXE, the Machine serves as a kind of narrator at times, which is also really fun and super cool. Honestly, you could just read this event just for that narration and likely be pretty content with it. That's how good the narration is. While Neil Gaiman and John Romita Jr. actually created the Machine in Volume 3 of the Eternals, Gillen actually helped give it an amazing voice and characterization in his 5th volume of that series. Number 9. Eternals vs. Mutants. This really isn't just about Eternals even versus X-Men. This conflict extends way beyond that, as we learn in AXE Eve of Judgment issue number 1. Here it's revealed that Prime Eternal Druig has an agenda against all mutants. It turns out he wants to kill them all. Why? Well, because he claims the mutants are actually deviants. That is, that they have grown to reach beyond what they should. They have deviated excessively, which is, after all, what Eternals are meant to fight against as one of their own prime directives. Druig, however, doesn't really care as much about killing mutants. I mean, deviance, as he does about cementing his own position as Eternal Prime. The Machine was really hoping that Druig would be content to have simply achieved this title, which happened, by the way, in the Eternal series. If you're wondering where you can find that story, like I said, you should read it. But alas, Druig is too paranoid to feel secure and content and wants some accolades to add to his name, so he can be like the greatest Prime Eternal ever, which he could get if he destroyed the mutants in the name of what the Eternals are meant to stand for, eliminating deviance. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, you should go check out our new channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. It is really cool, and we want you to go and give all the anime manga love that you have over to the channel. And over to James. Say hi to James while you're over there. Number 8. The Secret of the Eternals' Resurrection. This is another thing that, like the Machine's quirky personality, was actually covered in the Eternals series. However, for those of you who haven't gotten there yet, this is also covered in Judgment Day, more specifically being recapped in AXE Eve of Judgment, so you can, be in on the secret, because it's pretty integral to what's happening here with the Eternals. And so for some, this is probably a pretty big revelation because, like I said, I don't think everyone that's reading this event has read Eternals. What we learn here is that the Machine actually resurrects mutants by sacrificing a human life from Earth to do so. This is the reason that Phastos is actually imprisoned, kinda. He attempted to destroy the Machine upon learning of this revelation, but he didn't realize that the Machine is actually intrinsically tied to the Earth. In fact, it is the Earth. So destroying the Machine actually means destroying the world. But initially, Phastos thought it would actually be a solution for Eternals' immortality and actually save a ton of human lives that would, be sacrificed to resurrect Eternals whenever they fell. Icarus also must live with this revelation, as must the rest of the Eternals, and for Icarus, it's especially difficult as his interpretation of one of their Prime directives to protect the Machine was that this also meant protecting the humans of Earth. So you can see his contradictory dilemma, because to keep the Machine going means you're gonna have to kill some humans. It's not great. Number 7. Daredevil's Secret Identity. Daredevil's secret identity is back under wraps, and if you're wondering how all this happened because you remember him literally admitting to being Daredevil, it went down in the Purple story arc of Charles Soule's 2016 run on Daredevil. Here, Daredevil attempts to help the Purple children, Kilgrave's kids, who when joined together turn purple and get their father's powers. Some of the children are being held prisoner so that the Purple Man can harness their power to use for himself, making him impossibly strong to face. Daredevil, who normally has the willpower to resist the Purple Man's commands, actually finds himself unable to, as he struggles with his own identity and his sense of self. In the end, Daredevil is able to find himself and defeat Kilgrave in the process, and the Purple children, feeling bad for DD, who admitted in a court of law and is known the world over as then former attorney Matt Murdock, decide to use their power to help him, making everyone forget that Matt and Daredevil are one and the same person, and giving Matt back his secret identity. And when I say everyone, that includes Wilson Fisk, which is a major part of the reason that Fisk is so obsessed with Daredevil currently. He wants to know who he is, desperately seeking to unmask and destroy him, which sounds disturbingly familiar to past events, which didn't end well for Matt last time. Number 6. Icarus makes a deal. But not just any deal. Icarus talks to Jean Grey and in so doing decides that he will help Jean with Druig's invasion of Krakoa. To defeat the Hex, the mutants must venture to where they're being transported to Earth from, but there are a few problems. 1. Only Eternals can actually enter that area, and 2. Villainous, one of the most deadly Eternals, is currently there, surrounded by an armory of endless weapons. So yeah, might be kinda tricky for even someone as powerful as Jean to deal with that and get out alive. Oh, and while Icarus is willing to help, the deal only stands for him to get the mutants in there even, who need to be ready at a moment's notice to go with him, if Jean can ensure that no Eternals are killed. In typical Icarus fashion, being extremely just to a fault, especially with the revelation about the Machine plaguing his conscience. If any Eternals are killed, the deal will be off. Number 5. Janine is back. Not only has Ben returned, but he's also got his very own version of MJ, who is joining him along for the ride. We also get to see the return of Janine Godby in the final story of issue 74 of ASM, the lead into the Beyond event. Now for those who don't remember Janine, Woman, she was actually Ben's love interest back in the 1990s, and we haven't really seen her since then. She was on the run after she was severely mistreated by her father and basically killed him in self-defense. Her real name is Elizabeth Tyne, but she chose to change it to Janine Godby, because, you know, she on the run. And she still actually goes by Janine now, preferring it to her given name, probably because she associates that with a lot of trauma. Janine eventually felt that she needed to confront her past and accept the responsibility of her actions after listening to a speech that Ben gave to Kane about doing, well, just that. As a result, Janine turned herself in and confessed to killing her father. She ended up in prison and has been there till, well, now, when Beyond was able to make a deal to have her put in their care instead. During Beyond, she has mostly been confined to her and Ben's apartment, as she is still a criminal serving time. Nicer surroundings for sure, but she still acknowledges that she's pretty much just imprisoned. However, after developing her own suspicions and secretly being given the important Beyond drive from Ben, who then goes missing, the time comes for Janine to break out. Number 4. Iska the Unbeaten changes sides. In X-Men Red issue number 5, we learn of what happens to Arakko. This issue, by the way, is crazy, it's so good. We know from the main Judgment Day series that Arakko was attacked by Uranos, and presumably hit pretty hard by them. And if you're thinking, I mean, it's Arakko, how bad can it be? The answer is really freaking bad. Uranos is released from his cell by Druig for exactly 1 hour. Within 20 minutes, he had already put a huge dent in Arakko. Iska herself during the hour is forced to change sides due to her mutant power, which isn't a good sign. Iska's power, for those that don't know, is that she'll always win, but this means that her power has told her that Arakko winning is not possible if she's turning on them. So that's a really bad sign. Good for Iska though, because she actually does win, she survives, she gets to live another day, with Nightcrawler teleporting her away to help Arakko's odds after she turns on them. Nightcrawler's solution is basically like, well, if Iska isn't here, then her power can't like affect the outcome. You know what I mean? Bad for Arakko, as they now have to face Uranos without either Iska or Nightcrawler, and Iska also ended up breaking the Great Ring of Arakko when she killed Idil, one of her fellow council members. The really bad part with all of this though is that Uranos is successful and kills almost everyone on Arakko. And Arakko in X-Men Red was revealed to not believe in resurrection. So they have rejected that Krakoan gift, and as such, all of those who died will basically never come back to us. At least these mutants aren't going to come back from mutant resurrection protocols. Number 3. Superior 4. The Superior 4 started as another team of Mayor Fisk's, although they quickly evolved into something more aligned with Otto Octavius's own motives. Otto, you see, decided to sign up with Fisk as one of his own superpowered enforcers, simply because, well, he wanted to get his hands on the Baxter building, which the Fantastic Four were forced to abandon when Mayor Fisk's cronies came to seize any and all projects the FF was working on and arrest all the team members. Because, you know, they're illegal superheroes. They initially managed to capture Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, but their children, the Thing, and the Human Torch all managed to get away. In their place, Otto decided to create his own version of the team, scouring the multiverse for alternate versions of him, who also happen to be alternate versions of the FF's backup roster. So now we have the Superior 4 led by 616 Otto, and featuring Otto versions of Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and, you guessed it, the Hulk. Pretty great. Number 2. Recipe for a God. One group of the Eternals has a plan to defeat Druig by creating a god. They kidnap evil geneticist Mr. Sinister, who currently is a little less evil, working with the mutants instead of against them, of course, on Krakoa. With his and the Avengers' help, using their headquarters, which is the body of a dead Celestial, they set out to make their plan happen. The good news is they succeed, rewriting the programming of the Celestial to make it more aligned with their own beliefs and principles when it awakens. The bad news is the progenitor, which is the name of the Celestial, comes back to life only to inform our heroes that in 24 hours everyone on Earth will also be judged, as they feel those living there have caused so much harm that they too should perhaps be destroyed. They have till then to convince the progenitor that their first impression of Earth and of everyone on it is incorrect. Number 1. Mutants equals deviants? So the funny thing is that Druig, while sort of fabricating a connection between deviants and mutants with dramatic interpretation of excess deviation, actually may have been onto something. When the Celestial comes online and threatens the world, the Quiet Council must decide what to do and possibly take action. However, as they are talking about using some potential secret weapons, Emma Frost reveals she has one of her own. She has made an alliance with the Deviants, who head to Krakoa to help in the fight against the Eternals. The hilarious and amazing part is when Crow reveals to Cyclops that Deviants can use mutant gates, likely thanks to their genetics being so similar to mutants. So perhaps mutants are deviants after all.
Coming in at number 10, we're starting off with Morbius, a movie that's technically a Sony production and not from Marvel Studios, but still appears to be somewhat MCU related regardless. Portrayed by Jared Leto, Morbius is set to tell the story of Dr. Michael Morbius, a scientist suffering from a rare blood disease who finds himself afflicted with a form of vampirism after he attempts to cure himself and becoming a violent antihero in the process. Although we only have a couple of trailers to go by at the moment, it seems like this movie will have some connections to the Spider-Man side of the MCU, with Michael Keaton's Vulture showing up and even some Spider-Man graffiti that seems to imply that this movie might just wind up being important for the Marvel multiverse that Peter Parker seems set to blow wide open in No Way Home. Speaking of a Spider-Man themed multiverse, coming in at number 9 we have Into the Spider-Verse 2. With the original Into the Spider-Verse being one of the best superhero movies ever made, in my humble opinion, we absolutely can't wait to see what happens next in this long-awaited sequel. With how many corners of Spider-Man's weird history that the original drew from, and with how interested Sony seems to be in connecting their various Spider-Man films, it seems like a solid prediction that there will at least be some cameos related to either Tom Holland or other MCU-related actors or characters, and I just can't wait to see what surprises are in store from the characters that taught us how anyone can really be Spider-Man. Coming in at number 8, we have our first proper MCU entry with the Disney Plus show Secret Invasion. Based on the comic book event of the same name, in which a large amount of Skrulls had infiltrated Earth's mightiest heroes and various government agencies, this miniseries will focus on Nick Fury and the Skrull Talos as they seek to uncover a Skrull conspiracy. Finally getting to see Nick Fury in a starring role after years of just being a supporting character in the MCU is definitely exciting, but the biggest appeal of this series for me is getting to see the political thriller elements of the MCU on display again, but this time with shape-shifting aliens involved as well. Don't you just love comic book weirdness?
Number 7, Mephisto. Mephisto has also been considered a huge threat during this time. We don't know what exactly he's been planning, but we do know that Moon Knight and Khonshu consider him to be a big threat. And Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze was also in pursuit of him near the beginning of the Empire event, but instead of wanting him gone, he just wanted some answers from him. For those who haven't been keeping up with Ghost Rider, something else you need to know going into Empire is that Johnny Blaze has currently taken over as the King of Hell, and is sporting some pretty sweet horns currently as a result. Later it's revealed that Moon Knight, who has been taking weapons, items, and powers from his fellow heroes, has been doing so in an effort to go after a great threat, later revealed to be at least in part Mephisto, because Khonshu has urged him to do so. In fact, it's implied Khonshu seems to want to take Mephisto's place potentially in some way. What we still don't know is what Mephisto or Khonshu have been plotting, and if there are still more threats that Moon Knight plans on neutralizing.
Coming in at number 6, we have Ms. Marvel. Kamala Khan has become a fan-favorite Avengers character over the last few years as a fangirl of the Earth's mightiest heroes that winds up gaining her own size-changing powers and becomes a homegrown superhero of her own. After thoroughly enjoying Ms. Marvel's role as a lead in the Avengers video game that released last year, I can't wait to see this character explored more in depth on screen and building up to the 2023 MCU film The Marvels, in which Kamala Khan will finally get to team up with her idol and inspiration, Carol Danvers.
Number 5, Time Runs Out. Time Runs Out is an event that bridged the gap between Infinity and Secret Wars. The Illuminati already know that the incursions are on their way, and this event sees them and different heroes attempt to tackle this issue head on. Everyone has their own approach. Some heroes plan to destroy any other universes on a collision course with theirs, others look for a way to prevent the incursions happening altogether, not wanting to, destroy other universes, and even still, some are forced to prepare for what seems to be, basically at this point, inevitable. In the midst midst of all this, Captain America and Iron Man are also on opposite sides once again, with Cap and the Avengers fighting against Iron Man and the Illuminati. And as if the Illuminati wasn't radical enough in their attempts to deal with the incursions, Namor also splinters off from the group to create his own, even more extreme group known as the Cabal, who are willing to do whatever it takes to stop the incursions.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. Now, the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie has had a long road to being made, with James Gunn being briefly let go from the project and getting to make the Suicide Squad before eventually being rehired. But before we get to a proper full-length reunion for the Guardians in 2023 with Volume 3, 2022 will be bringing us the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, apparently inspired by the infamous Star Wars special of old and being filmed on the same sets as Volume 3. If there's anybody that can teach us the true meaning of Christmas in 2022, it's gotta be Rocket Raccoon, right?
Number 3, Avengers vs. Fantastic Four. Well, I mean, not so much versus, I guess. These two aren't really fighting one another directly, but we do learn in Empire number 1 that both of these different teams have different approaches when it comes to what they consider the best move is here for how to handle all the chaos that is coming at them in this Empire event. Fantastic Four take a more diplomatic approach, trying to negotiate initially, while Avengers are gearing up to smash things with some of those sweet hammers we just talked about. Smash.
Coming in at number 2, we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. When it comes to movies that have already been built up in the MCU, the Doctor Strange sequel just might have the most hype going for it. We'll have the return of Wanda Maximoff after the stunning events of WandaVision, and the continuation of Strange's adventures in the multiverse following his contribution to the events of Spider-Man: No Way Home. Add the fact that this film is being directed by the one and only Sam Raimi, the mastermind behind the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, and this movie seems destined to deliver some of his wild horror as we continue to explore the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Thor: Love and Thunder, the 4th Thor movie overall, and the incredibly anticipated sequel to Thor: Ragnarok. Featuring the return of that film's iconic director, Taika Waititi, and also featuring Natalie Portman getting to return as Jane Foster's incarnation of Thor, and this movie seems poised to even outdo its much-beloved predecessor. Add the incredibly talented Christian Bale as Gore the God Butcher, on top of cameo appearances by all of the Guardians of the Galaxy following Thor's adventures with them post-Endgame, and Thor: Love and Thunder is my most anticipated MCU film of 2022.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Anthony the Vampire. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Avengers issue 14, Anthony was the greatest vampire hunter who ever walked this earth. He trained Daredevil, Blade, and Edward Cullen. Okay, the last one I lied about, but still, you get it. When he meets up with Blade later on, he has a new look. He was eventually bitten by a vampire, so he became their leader as well. The coolest part about Anthony is that he uses a Mark I Iron Man suit to get around during the day, so the sun doesn't, evaporate him or whatever. He captured and turned Smart Hulk into a bloodsucker, but his armor was stolen and used by Stick to fight back. Another Tony, another suit. Imagine you're in trouble and this guy rolls up on you. What a surprise that would be. Issue 16 of Ultimate Avengers opens with a great Twilight parody, but this is also the last time we see this Iron Man take flight. And that's because Hulk punched his head off, and usually when he does that, you don't come back, vampire or not. Number 9, Iron Lantern. From the Amalgam comic universe, Iron Lantern is of course a millionaire who is in charge of Stark Aircraft. While he's working on a flight simulator, it straight up took off and flew him somewhere else. Best simulator ever, if I do say so myself. Then it crash landed on the ground, injuring Stark, and he realized he was brought to a crashed alien spaceship. That spaceship belonged to none other than Roman Sir, who died before getting a chance to talk to Hal Stark. Not being in the best condition, obviously, after the rocky landing, Hal started working with his newfound tech on a new suit, hopefully to save his life. The Green Lantern upgrade of his suit saved his life for sure, but it also gave him the power to create anything out of green energy. He used a battery that reminded him of a lantern to do so. And then he went on to fight the aliens that had shot down Roman Sir and continued fighting enemies such as Madame Sapphire and Mandarin Esto, who, yes, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It really helps us out here quite a bit. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get right back into this list of weird Iron Mans. Number 8, Lord Iron. Coming from Marvel 1602, Lord Iron was amongst the other heroes who rose to fame, but a little bit back in time. See, Captain America was literally shot back in time, so the Age of Heroes has to begin there. And in turn, we get some fun versions of our Avengers. Anthony Stark was taken and held captive in the Holy Land during the English and Spanish War, a little different than the cave that he ended up with in our time. He was forced to make weapons still for them for weeks, mirroring Tony's origin in a fun, older way. David Banner was torturing him this time around though, so Anthony makes his own suit powered by lightning bottles. Okay. Now it doesn't matter which timeline Tony ends up in, he's destined to be Iron Man one way or another. Number 7. Captain Logan. Coming from the noir series Earth 90214, Jim Logan was a detective, much like our 616 Logan. His past was also troubled. His partner was his half-brother named Dog Logan, who has the brains of a bedbug and the manners of a gutter rat. And that's in his words, not mine. His origins are a little bit messy when it comes to the noir verse, because in X-Men Noir, Mark of Cain, Wolverine's origins are that of a bootlegger whose past is never really touched on. All we know is that he's a former lover of Jean Grey, and that he was the one who took out Scott Summers' left eye. But here in Wolverine Noir, he's a detective with a gritty Catholic past. Either way, the noir versions of Wolverine is quite dark, and although his claws aren't built in this time around, he still has them as a weapon of choice. Real Freddy Krueger style, I like it. Number 6. Weapon X. One of the more extreme versions of Wolverine, Weapon X came from the Age of Apocalypse storyline, and the first time we meet him is in X-Men Alpha issue 1. Weapon X was a member of the X-Men, only this time around Magneto is running the team. How lovely is that? He's great. One of the most notable differences between this Logan and others is that Weapon X is missing a hand. He had battled Cyclops, and although he lost it in the fight, Logan can still use claws on that arm. Now in this reality, Weapon X was married to Jean Grey, so a little light in this warped reality. Love still exists out there, it's true. He later on became Weapon Omega, aka the heir to Apocalypse, so it's really not that great. There's love, but there's also evil stuff. Number 5. Zombie Wolverine. We're just a day out from another episode of What If on Disney Plus, and we're all so excited, and I'll be honest, a little bit nervous because those zombie Avengers are still superpowered and they're still on the way. Zombie Wolverine first appeared in Ultimate Fantastic 4 issue 22. Now at the Xavier Institute, Wolverine and the X-Men were taken on a zombified Alpha Flight when Magneto came in to save the day. He was part of the crew that went to fight off the remaining horde, but I did introduce him as Zombie Wolverine, so yes, he was sadly infected. Wolverine was bitten by Zombie Hawkeye and Zombie Cap, and after he turned into one himself, he defeated and then ate the Silver Surfer. An afternoon snack quickly gave Wolverine cosmic powers, quite the upgrade. It's a gory good time. If we had X-Men in the MCU right now, the zombie episodes would have been so much better, but we can't complain, it's still good stuff. Wolverine is a main character in the Marvel Zombies Dead Days and a minor antagonist in Marvel Zombies vs. Army of Darkness. If you haven't read either, I recommend you read both of them. Read all the zombie comics. I shouldn't have to sell you on how cool zombie superhero comics are. You know? Number 4. Mr. Murderhands. There's a nickname, a rather fitting one, really. Logan from Earth 65 first appeared in Spider-Gwen Volume 2, Issue 20. He was a former Japanese samurai who was cursed by a witch. The curse was that you have to live on Earth for all the days that his targets, the people that he killed, would have. So he's gonna see quite a few days, basically. His memory here is also erased, and it happens right after he joins the Weapon X program, where he's also given his trademark adamantium claws. When he later joins S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Black Ops team, his fellow operatives give him the nickname of Mr. Murderhands. Nice. Oh, this is your teammate, Edward Murderhands. Yeah, make sure you sign in. Great, break a like, team. Number 3, Steel Corpse. Tony and his suit have always been so close. It's had its back many times, sometimes even acting for itself and making a judgment call. Like in Iron Man 3, it literally woke Tony up from a nightmare aggressively. We love that future tech. But in the Age of X storyline, the suit literally has his back as Tony and the suit begin to merge. Ugh, I'm itchy just reading this. This started right after a virus began taking its toll on Tony. He was rapidly declining health-wise, so we chose a more fitting name, Steel Corpse, to be kind of funny, but also he looks like a corpse, so he's like, nah, I'm just gonna admit it. He, alongside other, much healthier Avengers, were tasked to take down mutants, but when the gang got there, they of course opted to save them instead. Superhero twist of logic, we love it. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board with his new plan, and it started to act out by itself. It still wanted to save the day, although this was not the right way to do it. Captain America had no choice but to end the life of Steel Corpse in order to save the mutants. Number 2, Iron Goblin. Making making his first appearance in the Spider Island series, Iron Goblin wasn't made through any reality warping or anything like that. Instead, this happens during the Resistance assault on Spider-Queen, which is sounding crazier than what I just said. Tony Stark ends up getting captured and infected with the spider virus. He's going nuts at this point, so the rest of the heroes try and snap him out of it by using Goblin Formula, which is a solution, I guess. I don't know, read a book, read a comic book, Avengers. Something bad's gonna happen. So he went from being a spider monster to Iron Goblin. Pretty crazy 24 hours for Tony. Tony was still Tony after this point though, despite the evil green look on his face. Like he even said Norman stole his armor before, so he was just evening it out. Haha, he's funny, he's still Tony, nice. But as time went by, every minute that passed, that formula started to in fact change Tony. Like for example, he was flying around on the glider, although he can fly with his suit. It's not looking good. He knew he was going insane, so he sacrificed himself when the Queen's army attacked. Still a hero nonetheless, although he's mean and green and throwing pumpkin bombs. And finally, number 1, Iron Hammer. Coming from Warp World, Iron Hammer, aka Stark Odinson, first came to life in issue 3 of Infinity Wars. So when Gamora had the Infinity Stones, she trapped everybody's soul in the Soul Gem, and then folded the universe in half, which resulted in all of our heroes merging together. Pretty fun. So rightfully referred to as Warp World, we soon get to meet Soldier Supreme, Ghost Panther, Weapon Hex, and Iron Hammer. Stark Odinson in this pocket universe is the son, of course, of Howard Odin, chieftain of Asgard. He has the Iron Hammer armor, and of course he has a massive literal hammer of the gods to get the message across. Being a combination of both, he can face powerful villains like Stain Odinson, who is a blend of Loki and Obadiah Stane, and even Madam Hell, one of the coolest looking versions definitely, and also one of the more powerful. A great note to end on. Kicking off the list at number 10, Darkclaw. Coming from the Amalgam universe, where DC and Marvel combine powers figuratively and literally, we get a Wolverine Batman double whammy. First appearing in Legends of the Darkclaw issue 1 back in 1996, at just age 5, young Logan Wayne witnessed the death of his parents, so now we have that Batman origin right off the bat to lay the foundation. Good stuff, always promising. And then Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Canada. But after poachers ambushed his home, we have even more family members biting the bullet. So far, so sad. Okay, so Logan Wayne enlisted then in the Royal Canadian Air Force and soon after the Weapon X program. This is all starting to sound a bit familiar, I bet. That's when the Wolverine origin comes in. Logan Wayne got the adamantium treatment, but it was a failure. In a way, kind of. Because Logan wasn't this mindless brute like he was in the comics. See, now he kept his sanity. So now we're starting to get more of a positive vibe, which is good for a good start of this list. Afterwards, he was a free man, so he studied criminology, forensics, gymnastics, martial arts, anything he could get his hands on, including the 127 major styles of combat. That mixed with the claws, Logan Wayne is somebody I'd never want to cross paths with, either as Batman or just Wolverine. Either way, I'm like, no, you guys are both gonna kill me. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, support our man Wolverine. He is Canadian, we are Canadian, only makes sense. Really hit those thumbs up. You guys are the best. Let's get back to the list. Number 9, Wild Thing. For this one, we go over to the MCU universe where Elektra married Wolverine and soon after came a child, of course. That daughter was named Rena Logan, and if that name doesn't ring a bell, she's also called Wild Thing. Marvel's MC2 imprint quickly gained momentum after What If, issue 105, which introduced us to a universe full of other super kids. Wild Thing's powers are very similar to her father's, obviously. I mean, even just by looking at her, you could probably make a guess who she's an offspring of. All that aggression, you're like, okay, it's definitely Wolverine. She also possesses the power of regenerative healing and super strength, but what makes her stand out really is the psychic claws. Instead of adamantium claws, she has minor psionic abilities that allow her to manifest her own claws, but if she focuses hard enough, if she really thinks, she can have claws, real life claws like her father, and dish out physical damage too. Mental, physical, she's got you beat in both realms. Number 8, Hydra Wolverine. Hearing Cap say "Hail Hydra" in Endgame was a wild moment to witness in theaters. Steve using future knowledge to save the day instead of kicking everybody's ass in the elevator, whilst tipping his hat to comic book fans. It was a nice moment, beautifully written in. In Exiles issue 92, we get to see Logan turn sides briefly as well. In this reality, Wolverine is a Hydra agent and the Invisible Woman is Madam Hydra. And to make things even more strange, they're both lovers. Yeah, this odd couple here alongside Slaymaster left their reality after fighting the Exiles, and they tried to conquer the multiverse. Hydra Wolvie wasn't around too long, for he was actually brutally taken out by the Cat with his own claws in New Exiles issue 12.
Coming in at number 7, we have the powerless Dr. Stephen Strange. In issue number 40 of the first volume of Marvel's original What If comics, we got to see an alternate reality where Baron Mordo wound up becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. And while most of the story would focus on Mordo's misadventures in the role, Doctor Strange's role in it is definitely unique to say the least. When Stephen Strange showed up on the Ancient One's doorstep wondering if there was any possibility the mystic arts could heal his hands, the Ancient One simply taught him some anxiety-decreasing meditation, and then sent him on his way, making Strange believe that it was all some sort of yoga retreat. This version of Strange would go on to merely become a peaceful professor at a medical school, which, compared to the Sorcerer Supreme's usual lifestyle, is definitely a little bit, well, strange. Coming in at number 6, we have Strange Supreme from the first season of the Disney Plus show, What If? In an alternate timeline where instead of losing his hands in a car accident, Stephen Strange instead has to endure the loss of the love of his life, Dr. Christine Palmer. Desperate to bring her back, Strange trains in the mystic arts, but finds himself drawn to much darker powers as he realizes that Christine's death is a fixed point in this timeline, and it would take an incredible amount of magical power to undo it. Turning to the dark side and becoming Strange Supreme, Strange absorbs centuries worth of magical beings before finally absorbing even his own better self. Tragically, even when he does have enough power to save Christine, she is disgusted at the monster he's become to save her, leaving him alone as the entire universe collapses around him. Coming in at number 5, we have the elderly Doctor Strange from Earth 982. An alternate universe that mainly focused on potential children of Marvel heroes and the next generation of crime fighters, Earth 982, or MC2 as it's more commonly known, is also home to one of the most unique versions of Doctor Strange, because instead of his traditional salt and pepper look, this Stephen Strange has gone full Gandalf the White. Having long since retired from the position of Sorcerer Supreme, an elderly Strange is called back into action as a master of the mystic arts when the new wielder of the role, Doc Magus, begins to tamper with darker powers. And while Strange would need help from the younger generation of heroes, this grizzled but still magical sorcerer is definitely one of the coolest looking versions of the character. Coming in at number 4, we have Doctor Strange of the year 1602 from the Marvel series of the same name. In this offshoot of the multiverse where many of Marvel's classic heroes were now born during the era of the 17th century, Dr. Stephen Strange was an advisor to the first Queen Elizabeth, and the right-hand man to the monarchy when it came to all matters relating to magic. This old-timey take on the character would be weird enough on its own, but gets extra bizarre when you consider that this version of Strange was eventually executed by the monarchy for treason, but continued to give guidance to this Earth's heroes as a ghost from the afterlife. Talk about not retiring when your time is up, am I right?
Number 3, Primal Wolverine. A side we don't get to see too often is Logan's animalistic side, although maybe it's for the best, we don't want to see that. We don't want any of that smoke, really. Coming from the Mutant X series back in 1998, we pick up with Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Wildchild, but this time around they're referred to as the Pack. Now in this story, Logan still goes crazy after Weapon X does their thing, but this time he's not alone. Sabretooth and Wildchild also endure these crazy experiments, each of them also going primal in the end. Now the three of them end up roaming the Canadian wilderness like an actual pack. But this pack is one you want to avoid. They end up going nuts by the end of the comic, like I said, but while they're in the wild, they did see other mutants, and in turn they all worked together for a hot moment to figure out what was happening in Weapon X. They have the right idea, but those animalistic impulses are just too powerful. Messy. Number 2, Old Man Logan. Mark Millar's Old Man Logan begins in volume 3 of Wolverine on issue 66, and this is a future where supervillains have sadly won for the most part. Hulk and She-Hulk had kids, the Hulklings, who would beat the crap out of you if you didn't pay rent. So yeah, it's an odd future to say the least. Everybody has their own territory, so Logan now has to pay up for living in his. Hawkeye, who was much older and this time around he was blind, needed Logan's assistance to get across the country and deliver a secret package. This was a way Logan could get some of that rent money, so let's do it. Just talking about Logan paying rent money is a weird thing. When they get back from their trip, things have changed drastically. Now Hulk Gang actually took out Logan's family because, you know, They were bored. And that's what people do when they're bored in this dark future. No more games, no more talking. Now it's time for Logan just to get payback. Simple as that. Alternate reality, same temper. Logan gets Banner, he gets him right through the chest, so naturally he hulks out. And then when Hulk eats Logan, you think that would for sure be the end of it, but that's when Logan pops out from inside Banner. Surprise, we're gonna throw up. And finally, number 1. Old Man Venom. Coming from Edge of Venomverse issue 4, we see Logan get captured by Angel, who is Archangel in disguise, and Hulk Jr. This story played out differently than the Old Man Logan storyline because this Wolverine told Bruce Banner Jr. what happened to his father. Archangel took Logan to the danger room of the X-Mansion, and that's where he and Bruce Jr. just ambushed him. Wasn't very happy this time around, although the first one wasn't really happy in any way, I guess, either. Bruce Jr. had this idea that maybe if he kills Logan, he can then use his DNA and create symbiote hybrid clones, but what ended up happening was Logan fought a Venomsaurus Rex, that same T-Rex from the original Old Man Logan storyline. The same one we see chasing Hawkeye and Logan. So he fought it, got eaten by it, and then considering the fact that Logan was eaten by the Hulk and ripped his way out, we already know that this is gonna be much better. He comes out better than ever. The symbiote ends up bonding with Logan in the T-Rex tummy, giving us a pretty exciting extreme upgrade. He rips his way through the dinosaur and subsequently rips his way through his enemies.
Coming in at number 10, we have the undead Doctor Strange from the Marvel Zombies universe. While this version of Stephen Strange was able to avoid the initial outbreak of the zombie virus that destroyed their version of Earth, he was eventually tragically bitten and converted into a member of the undead army while defending a dimensional doorway that would have allowed the zombie swarm to invade and infest other realities. The newly zombified Doctor Strange now uses this doorway to peer through the alternate worlds of the Marvel multiverse and find ideal worlds for the zombie invasion to begin anew, making this a very weird but also very dangerous interpretation of Doctor Strange. Coming in at number 9, we have the Soldier Supreme, a very odd combination of Doctor Strange and the Punisher. On an alternate Earth where vampires have killed most of the world's heroes and converted much of the normal population, one of the few vigilantes remaining is Frank Castle. Possessed by the spirit and knowledge of Dr. Stephen Strange as a last-ditch effort to save this reality, the Punisher and the Sorcerer Supreme combined into a single vampire-slaying enemy, turning the Punisher's violent tendencies into the last defense against an unstoppable vampire army. Coming in at number 8, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Doctor Strange, aka Stephen Strange Jr. In the Ultimate Marvel Universe, this version of Doctor Strange that we're introduced to is actually the son of a more traditional interpretation of the character. Following in his father's footsteps, Stephen Strange Jr. eventually becomes the Sorcerer Supreme following his dad's disappearance. But the odd part that gets him on this list is unfortunately his over-the-top and needlessly nasty death. During the Ultimatum event, a highly controversial storyline in which Magneto wiped out millions of lives and resulted in dozens of over-the-top and edgy deaths for many Marvel heroes, Doctor Strange had his head popped like a literal balloon by Dormammu possessing his cloak. Most people dislike this event because of how deliberately edgy it tried to be, and with an anticlimactic death like this, it's really not hard to see why. I mean, his cloak? Really?
Number 7. Iron Man Noir. Coming from the Noir series, Iron Man of Earth 90214 had to go all the way to Atlantis to fix his heart problem. What am I talking about? Let's find out. Tony in this reality was an industrialist adventurer. It feels like National Treasure almost. We meet Tony and the crew and they're looking for something called the Jade Mask. This mask that was said to cure any kind of ailment, so he figured, hey, it's worth a shot to fix the old ticker. It didn't work, so some traitors then revealed themselves once the mask was found, so Tony and Rhodey escaped and returned to New York. He goes on yet another treasure hunt with Rhodey, this time to Atlantis, because he heard a rumor that this power source could also do wonders to his heart, maybe, perhaps. Tony gets the trident and again, he gets betrayed. Zemo and his forces were strong enough to kidnap Pepper, and Tony and Rhodes need a new plan. They travel to Zemo's castle, and it's then that it's revealed that Zemo is actually Tony's father, brainwashed by Strucker. And he was also equipped with Iron Man suits because action and adventure. As far as noir storylines go, Iron Man isn't my favorite, but the whole Nathan Drake vibe that Tony has is still quite fun. And also, Atlantis. It's kind of weird. Dive in. Number 6. Earth X. Also known as Earth 9997, this version of Iron Man hit the pages back in Earth X issue 0. This time around, the human race is at risk due to the release of Terrigen mists. So Tony decides, you know what, I'm just going to isolate myself, not being sure how the mist would react, which is a fair point. So in turn, he would wear his armor all the time, and then eventually he made an Iron Manor in New York. Super cautious, you know, with today's stuff going on, you can't really blame him. He went even further when he decided it was best to create his own team, the Iron Avengers. This guy was super paranoid. So eventually Galactus did come along, so Tony used his Iron Manor and distracted the Celestials beforehand. Now during this, Tony lost his life. Some wreckage impaled him, and for the first time in a while, Tony was able to breathe open air. How, you ask? Well, he died, and his soul immediately went to the realm of the dead, and that's when Captain Marvel's soul recruited him for an army set to take on death. Which is, first of all, nuts, because even after you die in Marvel Comics, you can't just chill out in heaven. You have to go fight another war immediately. Come on. But Death did eventually die, and that's when Tony got another huge upgrade in Paradise. Using the High Evolutionary's devices, Tony was changed into this angelic being, of course, still with wings. And he looked like Iron Man, so that's fun. You can customize your own angel outfit once you get up there. That's good to know. Number 5. Tony Doom. Since What If is currently dropping weekly episodes on Disney+, we have to mention one of the more wild issues. What if Tony Stark had become Dr. Doom? It would probably be pretty bad. Yeah, yes, it is. So here in the storyline, that both of them go to the same college instead of Reed Richards being Victor's roommate. So now it's Tony. Two geniuses in one dorm. Sounds like they would make dreams come true, but in reality, it was a living nightmare waiting to happen. Doom tricked Tony into switching bodies Freaky Friday style. And on top of that, Tony's memories were also wiped. So Tony, in Doom's body, gets in heat for the experiment, and in turn, he gets sent back to Liberia. Meanwhile, Doom is in line to take over Stark Industries. He still is Tony Stark, so down the road, Doom Industries was now a competitor to Stark Industries. He's brilliant in any way. The pair end up creating their own armors, of course. Tony builds a red and gold Doom armor, while Doom makes a green and gray Iron Man armor. I'll give you a second to absorb that. There we go. It's a fun little swap with good action, but it's a little bit too confusing of a Freaky Friday type plot. But it's worth a shot. Go give it a try. Number 4. Dead Man Walking. We look now over to Fantastic Four: The End, released in 2007. Most of Tony's story here was the same, but during the Mutant Wars, Tony lost his life. Now, he didn't get redirected to a paradise where he would then become an Iron Man themed angel. Instead, he uploaded his subconsciousness into an AI. So now he lives through his armors, just swapping back and forth, walking around, which sounds like a solution, I guess, but living forever? Come on, Tony, I don't think that's a way to go, really.
Coming in at number 3, we're back in the world of animal puns with Croctor Strange. That's right, Loki isn't the only magical hero with an alligator alter ego. Hailing from the same reality as the meme-worthy Spectacular Spider-Man, Croctor Strange is an anthropomorphic crocodile who learned his magic from a being known as the Rancid One, and often clashes with the pig-themed Dormammu. And if that's not punny enough for you, this version of Strange is also a member of the Unhumanati instead of the Illuminati, which also features a mouse-themed version of Iron Man. Ooh, and I thought they said Disney taking over wouldn't have any weird side effects. Coming in at number 2, we have a wild combination with the DC Universe with Doctor Strange Fate. During the Marvel vs. DC miniseries of comics, an alternate reality known as Amalgam Comics was born, featuring combinations of iconic DC and Marvel heroes put into one body. One of the most notable of all of these crazy combinations was the being known as Doctor Strange Fate, a three-way mix-up between Dr. Stephen Strange, Dr. Charles Xavier, and the DC hero Dr. Fate. Man, this guy's got more PhDs than a diploma factory. With all of these magical, telepathic, and reality-warping powers combined, Doctor Strange Fate was incredibly powerful, but one of the weirdest aspects of the character was the fact that he knew he was just a temporary creation of a crossover event, and thus spent much of his time attempting to find a way to keep his reality ongoing. How very meta of you, Doctor Strange Fate. And finally, coming in at our top spot is the only Doctor Strange variant with feathers. We have Ductor Strange. Hailing from the same weird world as Howard the Duck, aka Earth 791,021, you might be wondering why a duck-themed version of Doctor Strange is labeled as weirder than a crocodile-themed one. And that is because this Ductor Strange is also a drunk. Studying under the ancient wino, this Strange's version of communicating with spirits secrets is literally drinking spirits, although he does still possess enough magical energy to be able to transport himself and various other duck-themed heroes to different dimensions, including the mainstream Marvel universe. Just maybe lay off the booze a little bit. I'm not sure how well birds can handle their liquor.